Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Became the Hero of Pelican Town? Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. God to meet problem child. Aizawa should have expected this really. His class could never do anything without being involved in some villain attack or major incident. And of course, whatever contrivance fate had decided to curse the underground hero with on any given day always seemed to revolve around Midoriya Izuku, from facing down S-class villains during internships or training camps to breaking his body during his first sports festival. So why did he let Hisashi talk him into chaperoning a class shopping trip? Eraserhead rubbed his temples in an attempt to assuage the incoming migraine he could feel coming on. He was hesitant to bring the class back to the mall where Midoriya had been held hostage by Shigaraki. It just seemed like tempting fate, but with Mike arguing that it would be best to keep an eye on him personally and Midoriya's insistence that he was fine going back, he decided to go ahead with his class. You would think he learned his lesson by now. A child had been separated from his mother and panicked, and accidentally lost control of his quirk. His class had been near the child, specifically two, Midoriya Izuku and Jiro Kyoka, the former who moved closer to help the obviously distressed child, the latter placing herself as far from Mineta as she could. When the young boy's quirk activated, bright blue light began filling the area around him, blinding most in the surrounding area, with the two students unable to be seen through the effect. Aizawa was quick to use his own quirk on the child, but the two had completely vanished with no sign of their presence. Namuri Kiyama, better known as the pro-hero Midnight, began to search for the boy's parents, both to prevent another episode as well as know exactly what quirk he had, while Aizawa stayed back to keep his own class calm and keep the child's quirk suppressed, if need be. The disappearance of the Midoriya and Jiro had obviously caused distress with their classmates, but to their teachers' pride they handled it like the aspiring pros they were. Once it was clear the child's quirk was under control, Uraraka and Azui moved to keep the child calm and letting him know that heroes were working to find his parents. Yaoyorozu and Todoroki coordinated efforts to keep civilians out of any harm, and Ida assured his class that their teachers would have the situation under control and find out what happened to their friends. Aizawa, the voice of Namuri, drew the underground hero's attention. I found the boy's parents and found out what his quirk is. Good, I'm already regretting coming here, and I just want to get a nap in. So, what is it? I'm guessing some form of teleportation. That was the most likely situation, if a tad annoying not knowing where the two students were. Not exactly, it's a little more complicated than that, said the R-rated heroine, before dropping her voice to a whisper to prevent the class from overhearing. His quirk is able to warp people, but not like the League's warper, it warps them to, quoting the parents directly, different worlds. Well, that was new. Out of all the possibilities Aizawa thought of, including those that would necessitate visiting the parents of the two with condolences, this wasn't one of them. Okay, putting aside the implications that comes with what you just said, is there anything we can even do? How do we get them back from wherever they are? Good news and bad news. Good news is that two family members had been affected by his quirk before, and in both cases, they both came back to the spot they were in 5 hours. Tenshin Aizawa didn't know he was holding fell from his body. He wouldn't have to be the one telling families how their children would never be coming back. Okay, that's good, we just have to keep the area clear and wait it out. What's the bad news? The first person, the boy's mother, said she only remembered being wherever she ended up for around 10 minutes before being sent back. The second, his older brother, said he was gone for a week. We don't know how long it will have been for the two, even if they end up at the same place. Knowing problem child's luck, he'll probably be on the longer side. Aizawa let out a tired sigh. Why couldn't anything involving that kid just end normally? I'll explain the situation to the police and get the area cordoned off and wait for the two. You explain this to the class and get them back to the dorms. Contact their parents too, they'll want to see their kids after they come back. Namuri gave a nod before gathering the class up to leave, while Aizawa made his way to the nearest officer, silently praying to whatever was listening that Midoriya and Kyoka come back with nothing more than a funny story and things going back to normal in a week. Something in his gut told him he wouldn't be that lucky though. Lewis sat at his dining room table enjoying the last of his breakfast before starting his day. Being the mayor of Pelican Town gave him several responsibilities to oversee, and the small size of the town gave him a personal obligation to carry them out personally. Sure, he could probably find someone willing to be his assistant, but he managed his duties over the years fine, and personally interacting with his neighbors built up the trust that had him elected mayor for 20 years straight. He ran unopposed for 20 years, but that was probably just a sign of how well he ran the town. Mayor Lewis was finishing his coffee when he heard a knock at his door, startling him. He didn't have any meetings with anyone today, either professional or his more personal dealings with Marnie. It was probably George coming by to complain about one of the younger residents doing something that young people liked, or Pierre complaining about the recent addition of a Joja Mart to the town. Both were semi-regular happenings and both he was tired of dealing with, as Lewis could neither control the will of the younger generation nor stop the Joja Corporation's recent move on their town, as much as he didn't like the business giant encroaching on the small town. Opening his door to see Elliot, out of breath from sprinting to his doorstep, was not what he was expecting. Elliot was far more concerned about completing his first novel than any of the goings-on of the other residents, so clearly something important must have happened. Mayor Lewis. Willie, two people teach. Harvey's, the young man panted out in between heavy breaths. Calm down, Elliot, just get your breath first. He couldn't understand what Elliot was trying to explain to him with his breathing so labored. His cabin wasn't that far from Lewis, so if he was out of breath he must have been in a hurry. Eventually the writer managed to catch his breath and explain the situation with better clarity. Willie found two strangers, a man and a woman passed out on the beach, probably washed ashore. They were still breathing but weren't waking up, so he had me come get you while he and Alex took them to Harvey's clinic. Said you would probably want to see them yourself. Well, now that was certainly a reason for panic. Not much in the way of danger happened in Pelican Town, beyond the monsters in the mine, but the Adventurers Guild took care of that. Two random people showing up in town needing medical attention was not something that happened every day. Or ever, to Lewis' knowledge. I appreciate you getting here quick, Elliot. You can go back home. I'll stop by Harvey's and make sure they're okay. Lewis closed the door behind him and made his way to the clinic, but not before asking Elliot some questions about the strangers. Did you get a good look at the two? Not really. Willie was carrying the woman over his shoulder while Alex was picking up the man. They both had fairly rare hair colors, purple and green, and were wearing a uniform similar to a boarding school. I didn't see their faces, but they were on the smaller side, so they might still be students. That was probably as good as Lewis was going to get without seeing them for himself, and begun to make his way towards Harvey's clinic. Alex was having an odd day. What should have been a normal day of training and grid ball practice was interrupted when he begun his early morning training on the beach. Normally Alex was by himself. Sometimes the old fisherman Willie was casting from the pier, or Elliot was staring at random stuff on the beach for inspiration or whatever. But today Willie was bent over two bodies, thankfully still alive, and was roped into helping them to the clinic while Elliot was told to go get Mayor Lewis. Not that Alex minded, he wasn't just about to leave someone in need of help because he wanted to train. Plus, he even managed to get some training in anyway, as the guy he was carrying to the clinic was kinda short, but made of pure muscle, making him fairly tough to carry across town. Maybe I should ask the guy for workout tips when he wakes up. Alex and Willie reached Harvey's clinic and placed the two on some beds to be examined. While Willie was explaining how he found them, Alex finally got a good look at the two. They both had unusual colored hair, the girl purple and the boy green, and were probably a little younger than Alex. The boy had 4 freckles on each cheek forming a diamond below each eye, and a closer look at his right arm showed some serious scarring, the kind that came from injuries that ended pro athletes. The girl was even weirder, as she had what looked like the end of headphones or auxiliary cords coming from her ears. Alex thought about tugging on one to see if it was real or if it would come off, but the good doctor ending his conversation with Willie and beginning his examination stopped him before he could. Weird ear things or not, Alex decided to stick around, wanting to make sure they were all right, but Harvey moved him out of the room, telling him the examination would be private. So, while Willie went back to his shop, he still had to make a living, Alex sat down and grabbed a magazine to pass the time. The mayor entered the clinic not long after Alex sat down. After telling Lewis what he knew and being told he would be informed when the two recovered, he left and got back to his interrupted training. Well, they should make a full recovery. The only reason I can tell for them still being out is exhaustion. The town's local doctor Harvey told Lewis. His initial examination for any potential life-threatening injuries didn't take too long, but after seeing the scarring on the boy's arm and the strange protrusions from the girl's ears, he took some x-rays and a nerve conduction test, which took up some time. Lewis was kind enough to bring the man some lunch after he lost track of time with his newest patients. Harvey led Lewis to the room the two were recovering in, while going over what he had found. They both seem in exceptional shape, suggesting a lot of physical activity, but I am rather concerned with the amount of scarring on the boy's arm. Whatever caused that injury gave him some permanent ligament damage to the point he may lose function in that arm permanently with a few more breaks. In addition, they both have evidence of a concerning number of micro-fractures over their body. Lewis turned to look at the two strangers. He knew better than to make assumptions based on appearance, but for the life of him he just couldn't picture either one of them starting trouble and causing fights to receive that many injuries in their lives. Maybe the boy got injured often in some sort of full-body sport, probably culminating in whatever happened to his arm. The girl might have gotten harassment from whatever was going on with her ears. Pelican Town might be a welcoming community, but he knew not every place was so tolerant. Harvey continued his diagnosis, breaking Lewis from his thoughts. They both seemed to have, for lack of a better description, changes to their body. Both? Asked the mayor. The girl's abnormality was obvious, but he couldn't see anything different about him. Even if green hair was fairly uncommon, it wasn't that strange. Yes, both. The boy might not have any obvious oddities, but his muscle and bone density are much higher than the norm. He could probably take any number of monsters in the mines with his bare hands. And I'm sure you have seen the cables coming from the girl's earlobes. They're fairly hard to miss, thought Lewis, but he didn't want to interrupt the doctor. What is surprising is that they are not just continuations of the ear's cartilage but contain nerves and musculature. I can't tell until she wakes up, but it's likely that the cables are completely prehensile. I'd like to run a brain scan on her to see what changes the addition of 2 new limbs has caused, but I don't have the equipment here. Harvey began to continue with more information about the boy's musculature that Lewis did not fully comprehend, so he simply nodded along to the doctor as he let his mind wander. Both of them were clearly not from anywhere around Pelican Town. Their uniforms didn't match any sort of boarding school within 100 miles, and surely some news about a girl with earlobe limbs or a boy with super dense muscles would have spread around, even if only as gossip. With the war between the Ferngill Republic and the Godaro Empire, news from the later nation was sparse. They could have come from the Empire, but neither of them looked like natives to Godaro. The last thing possible lead he had in mind was the wizard Rasmodius, who lived in the forest to the west of Pelican Town, but beyond the girl having purple hair and the two being odd, he really had nothing else to claim he was involved somehow. Lacking any better option, Lewis decided to make a trip to visit the wizard ladder in the day after making a post on the town bulletin board for a town-wide meeting tomorrow. As he thanked the doctor for his help and made his way out of the clinic, he had barely walked 10 paces before Harvey ran out the door and practically dragged Lewis back inside. The cause for the sudden retrieval was clear when Lewis was rushed back to the room he had just left, as the pair of strangers that had been lying unconscious were both slowly but surely rousing from their forced sleep. Out of all the hospital beds Izuku had woken up upon, this was one of the best. The cushion was actually soft and didn't feel like a slightly soft wooden board, and the blankets were actual blankets, not the thin sheets that Recovery Girl called a blanket. Overall, a solid 9/10 hospital bed. Wait, hospital bed? Izuku's eyes shot open, the panic rising in his chest not helped by the unfamiliar setting. This clearly wasn't Recovery Girl's office, and judging by how the medical posters on the walls were written in English, it wasn't anywhere he was familiar with. Izuku fought the stiffness in his neck to look around the room, seeing an L-shaped room with 3 beds, and in the bed to his left resided the music lover of Class 1A, Jiro Kyoka. While Izuku didn't enjoy the fact that whatever happened to him also affected one of his classmates, he was slightly relieved that he wasn't in unfamiliar territory alone. Okay, Izuku, try to remember what happened. The verdant-haired boy thought. We were at the mall with Aizawa and Kiyama, then that scared boy, then a bright light, and now here. While it didn't help explain what exactly happened, it did narrow it down to a quirk accident, which exited Izuku despite his best efforts to take the situation seriously. What quirk did the boy have? Was it teleportation? That would explain the strange hospital room. But why did Izuku and Jiro pass out? Did it use the energy of the people affected rather than the user? Maybe. Mop Top, is that you? It's too goddamn early for this. Jiro's drowsy complaints snapped Izuku out of his non-internal muttering. Why the hell are you even in my room? Her comment died on her lips as Jiro began to look around the room, eyes widening as her own panic grew. Where the hell are we? Jiro almost shouted at her classmate, distress clear in her voice. Do you remember when we were at the mall? A nod from Jiro prompted Izuku to continue. There was a boy that I think lost his mother, and his quirk acted up. If I had to guess, I think it was some sort of warp quirk. While Izuku did say it was a guess, to Jiro a guess from the resident quirk nerd was as good as confirmation to her. But that just raised more questions on their situation. Any idea where we are? She asked. But before Izuku could respond, the door to the hospital room opened up, and two men, clearly non-Japanese, walked in. The first had short, curvy brown hair and a mustache, glasses, and a green coat over a white dress shirt and tie. Ah, good, you're awake. The first man said in English while holding the door for the second man. This man was clearly much older than the first and had a head of gray hair under a flat cap, a larger mustache, and wore suspenders over a green dress shirt. You two caused quite a stir this morning, said the second man before letting out a small chuckle. I'm just glad you two are doing all right. Luckily both of the teens had learned English, Izuku from a desire to watch old untranslated All Might interviews from his time in America, and Jiro to understand the old classic rock albums her father had gifted to her one birthday. Izuku was the first to speak. Thank you for helping us, but do you know where we are? We aren't really familiar with this place, or how we got here. You're in Stardew Valley, Pelican Town to be more specific. The gray-haired man was clearly expecting such a question from the two odd teens. I'm Lewis, the town's mayor, and this is Harvey, he runs this clinic. As for how you ended up here, all we know is that our fisherman Willie found you two passed out on the beach. Izuku and Jiro gave each other a glance to see if the other had any idea where Pelican Town was, and clearly neither knew. Jiro spoke to the now identified Lewis. I don't think either of us know where that is. Are we in America right now? This time Lewis and Harvey were the ones to be confused by the situation. I've never heard of a place called America, Harvey said, almost missing the way his patience blanched at his words. Stardew Valley is a part of the Ferngill Republic. I could get you two a map to help show where we are. The two teens were quirked to accept the map, hoping it had the answers to their confusion, but when Harvey brought the two a world map, it only brought more panic. No, this doesn't make sense. Izuku muttered, where's Japan, or America? What the hell is Godaro? Before the map was snatched by one of Jiro's earjacks, while Harvey made a mental note that he was correct about the prehensile nature of her extra limbs, only to have a similar breakdown. Harvey was rather concerned with what the two were saying, and briefly considered that both of them might have a concussion from their confusion with basic geography, but the fact they both questioned the lack of the same countries was harder to explain. Suddenly the green-haired boy's eye sparked with a revelation. The kid's quirk, it either creates some sort of illusion or it is a warp quirk. But not like Kurogiri, instead he can warp people to other worlds. The boy's words were lost on the two natives of Pelican Town, and Harvey was making a mental note to schedule a psyche evaluation for the boy, but the strange claim seemed to mean something to the girl. Oh, come on, you can't be serious, Midoriya. That sounds like something out of some manga, or a half-baked fanfiction. Jiro was quick to shoot down his idea, but it was clear to everyone in the room that it was not because she didn't believe it, but because the idea of whatever the boy said being true terrified her. Lewis made a loud coughing sound to draw the two's attention. I think I speak for both myself and Harvey when I say, I am totally confused by what is going on. Harvey was quick to nod in confirmation. Izuku looked between Jiro and Lewis while mentally deciding what the best approach was. The two had clearly shown that they were unfamiliar with the location they ended up, and trying to play it off as confusion from the unconsciousness was not only not likely to work, but also caused problems in the future. A sigh escaped Izuku's lips as he realized the best course of action was to tell the truth of what was going on, no matter how strange and unbelievable it seemed. I know this is going to sound very strange, and it's kind of a long story, but please hear me out. Lewis simply nodded and dragged 2 chairs over for himself and Harvey to listen to the boy. Well, it started in a country called China, with a baby that glowed light. So, you come from a world where most people have superpowers, said a clearly exasperated Lewis. Yes, Izuku confirmed. Both of you are training to be heroes and stop people that use superpowers for crime. Yep, said Jiro. And a boy lost control of his quirk, and you think it sent you to another world. A world? That's basically all of it, said Izuku. He sympathized with Lewis even if he clearly didn't believe him. It would be hard for Izuku to believe anything like what he had just said without some form of proof. I know both of you just had something traumatic happen, and clearly you believe what you just said, but I don't see how anyone else could ever believe it, sighed Lewis, mentally wishing he could go back to this morning, when his biggest problem was collecting taxes. I believe them. Harvey's words stunned the three, Lewis, that a man of science was so quick to believe the story, and the 2 world travelers surprised that someone believed at all. Both of them have strange mutations in their bodies, and I doubt that someone being born with super dense musculature or 2 extra limbs from their ears wouldn't be a topic of some medical journal somewhere. I'd have to call in some favors to get the equipment for a brain scan, but if I can, we can prove that they have this quirk factor. Harvey began muttering to himself about the potential ramifications that such a discovery could have on the medical field in a way that made Izuku feel self-conscious. Well, regardless, Lewis' interjection stopped Harvey's mutterings and Izuku's self-reflection. It doesn't change the reality of the situation. We have 2 young adults that have no homes, known family, or employment. Izuku and Jiro exchanged nervous glances, but Lewis was quick to catch the worry on their faces. Oh, don't worry, none of us are going to kick you out or anything like that. We here in Pelican Town take care of our own, even if they've been in town less than a day and washed up on a beach. Lewis let out a small chuckle. The 2 where we lived, that the land they ended up in, seemed to be very friendly, and they were not being run out of town. I think I have a solution that will help you 2 with your problems, but give me a few days to finalize some things and inform the rest of the town. Harvey, I'll be holding a town meeting tomorrow so I can answer any questions the people have. Can you get Maru to come in and cover for you? I don't think I can explain this by myself. A nod from Harvey, still lost in his thoughts, was all Lewis needed before bidding his 2, hopefully, newest residents farewell. While Izuku and Jiro thought they would have time to rest once more after Lewis left, Harvey quickly snapped from his own personal bubble, intent on grilling the 2 about the nature of these quirks. I understand you're probably tired from today, but I do have a few questions. Now then, are people born with their quirks present, or do they manifest later? Jiro was considering engaging the doctor in conversation, but upon seeing Izuku's eyes light up at the prospect of talking quirks with someone as interested as himself, she held her tongue. Seeing him be so excited about a hobby was even kind of cute in a way. Wait, cute? While she had an internal panic at the rouge thought of finding the biggest nerd in her class cute, Izuku was happy to explain all that he knew on the topic of quirks, going so far as to grab his, now dry, notebook from the stack of folded clothes by his bed to show what notes he had taken on his classmates' quirks. It was while explaining how the exact type of quirk could affect the time frame of manifestation that Jiro turned her focus back on the conversation. What do you mean 16 months? 4 years is 48 months? Izuku and Harvey were both confused by the other, as something as simple as the number of months in a year shouldn't be a point of disagreement. Suddenly Harvey had a realization and quickly left to grab a small calendar he kept in his office. I think I understand the confusion, Harvey said while flipping the calendar to the current date. We must have different systems for measuring time. True enough, as Izuku and Jiro looked through the calendar, they saw 1 year was divided into 4 28-day seasons, totaling for 112 days in a year. Jiro kept looking through the calendar, noting the current date was winter 26th, 1 day after the Feast of the Winter Star, which in her opinion just seemed like an off-brand Christmas. While Izuku explained the system the two were familiar with, 1 year composed on 12 months and 365 days. Luckily, the system of 24 hours was constant, and the two wouldn't have to adjust to an entirely new sleep schedule. So, I guess with this calendar we would be around 52 or 53 years old. Jiro let out an amused huff, imagining a middle-aged Izuku throwing out his back fighting villains. Well, with that out of the way, I did have one last question. Harvey pulled out some x-rays he took of the two while checking for injuries. While most of any differences to the standard human body are explained by the presence of your quirks, there is one thing that is still nagging me. As Harvey placed the x-rays to the backlight, the images in question were shown to be the bones in the pair's feet. Kyoka, you lack a joint in your pinky toes, but Izuku doesn't. Is this in any way related to quirks? Wait, isn't the toe joint thing used to see as someone has a quirk or not? Jiro thought to herself, but Izuku has a quirk. So why does he have the extra joint? Her questions were answered by Izuku. Normally people with quirks only have the two-toe joints. I got misdiagnosed as Q-quirkless when I went to the doctor because I was born with the extra joint. I'm kind of a medical outlier. Jiro didn't see anything wrong with his explanation. Medical anomalies happen sometimes, and an extra toe joint wasn't that weird. But the way he refused to meet either her or Harvey's eyes was slightly concerning. I guess being diagnosed as quirkless was a bad day for him. Jiro reasoned. But even then, when his quirk manifested, it should have cleared everything up. I guess I'll ask him about it later. I see. Fascinating that such an evolutionary step would affect vestigial parts of the body. And yet somehow the appendix is still there. Harvey mused. Well, I've bothered you enough, I feel. I'll let you get some rest. If you need anything, I'll still be in the building. After Harvey turned off the lights and left the two so they could sleep, Izuku finally had time to ruminate on all the information he had been told. He was in a strange town, with strange calendars and strange nations, and no one knew what quirks were. Even when he wasn't quirkless, fate somehow found a way to make him the odd one out. Hey Midoriya, Jiro's voice called his attention. When talking about the toe joint thing, you seemed pretty out of it. While Izuku did welcome the concern, Jiro was touching on memories he would rather not dig up. Memories of the day he was branded less than human to society. It wasn't a good day for me. I always wanted to be a hero, even back then. And the doctor was not kind with how he told me. Izuku's voice was barely above a whisper, even in the close proximity of the hospital room. If Jiro didn't have greater hearing with her quirk, she might not have heard him. He told me, I'd give it up, kid, it's not gonna happen. Like he didn't even care that he was telling me my dream was impossible. Wow, that guy sounds like a D-. A small chuckle escaped Izuku's lips, which Jiro considered a win. But hey, you showed him. I bet when you got your quirk he changed his tune immediately. Jiro was hoping her words would help lift the gloomy atmosphere of the conversation, but the distraught look on Izuku's face before he turned around made it obvious. She only made it worse. 15. The boy mumbled out, and even with Jiro's hearing she couldn't hear all of what he said. Sorry, I didn't hear that. I was 15 when I got my quirk. Didn't have enough muscle mass to use it without blowing myself up, so my quirk didn't activate. It was a practiced lie that Izuku was accustomed to telling, but the implications of such information was never easy to tell anyone. Until the entrance exam, everyone thought I was Q-quirkless. Oh, well, that explained a lot. Jiro had wondered how someone with such a strong quirk was so timid, or how he made such drastic improvements with his quirk so quickly compared to everyone else. And why Bakugo thought he was quirkless for so long. He didn't hide his quirk from the blonde. Izuku didn't even know about it. Although, with the antagonistic way Bakugo always talked to Izuku, and the way he never fought back against the threats, Jiro didn't want to make the conversation any darker, so she left those implications alone for the time being. Well, who cares, you would have found a way to be a hero without a quirk. Anyway, Jiro said with the utmost confidence. Izuku was expecting a lot after such a revelation. Mockery, pity disguised as sympathy, but honest encouragement? Thanks for saying that, Jiro, but you don't need to lie to make me feel better. I'm not lying. Jiro assured the boy, it seems like every day you do some crazy impossible stunt to save someone else, and I'm sure you would have done it again to be a hero, no matter what anyone else told you. Izuku was stunned silent. Sure, he got told he could be a hero before, but it was always passerbys that didn't know that he was quirkless, even All Might only trained him to be able to receive his quirk. But Jiro was telling him with no hint of deception that she believed he could be a hero, no matter what. Even in the dark it was easy to see Izuku's face flush. Thank you, Jiro. Kyoka. The girl interjected. After that heavy conversation, you can call me Kyoka. It was hard to see in the dim room, but the small yet earnest smile on Jiro's, no, Kyoka's face made Izuku's heart hitch. Then you can call me Izuku. Only fair. The boy managed to sputter out. Sure thing, Izuku. Lewis looked over the gather crowd at the Stardrop Saloon. The saloon served as the usual gathering spot for any town meetings that were held, and nearly every member of the town had come. Maru was busy watching over the two newcomers in Harvey's absence, and the manager of the new Jojimart Morris didn't come to town events, seeing them as a waste of time. The only other missing face was the wizard, but even though Lewis made sure to deliver a notice of the time and place of the meeting to his tower personally, he didn't expect Rasmodius' arrival, due to experiments and research that could not be put off. While Gus and Emily were busy making food for the villagers that had to skip breakfast, Harvey and Lewis prepared to address the crowd. After talking with the two earlier in the morning, Izuku and Kyoka decided to keep the from another world that has weird powers called quirks under wraps. They hardly believed the situation themselves, and the last thing they needed was an entire town believing them to be insane. Instead, they would simply be two young travelers that could not return to their homeland for private reasons, while Izuku's superhuman strength and Kyoka's extra ear-based limbs the result of exposure to odd magics. Although magic was a documented phenomenon, not many beyond dedicated practitioners knew much about it, so it would serve as a plausible explanation. Alright, everyone that's going to be here is here and we all have busy days ahead of us, so I'll just get right to the point. The conversations of the villagers died out as every gave Lewis and Harvey their attention. As some of you already know, yesterday morning Wiley found two people, a boy named Izuku Midoriya and a girl named Kyoka Jiro, washed up on the beach by the pier before he and Alex brought them to the clinic. Both of them are doing fine now, but for reasons they would rather keep private, they don't have anywhere else to go for the foreseeable future. The comment got a few sympathetic looks from the group, particularly the three that found them. To be washed ashore and rendered destitute at such a young age must have been terrible. This meeting isn't to ask for handouts or donations, but because I've decided to offer them a place to stay on the old farm to the west. If they accept, the two will be the newest residents of Pelican Town. Several of the villagers were surprised by the news, as the mayor had turned down several offers to buy the once prized farm for a sizable sum, only to offer it up for free. George, a former coal miner now confined to a wheelchair, was the only one who seemed to have a major exception to Lewis' plan. You're going to give that farm away to two brats? That farm was the pride and joy of this town back in my day. And instead of doing anything meaningful with it, you just pass it off. George was friends with the old owner of the farm, a hard-working man named Gregory, but as he got on in years was saddled with the nickname Grandpa. Ironically, he didn't have any known grandchildren. His son died before having kids of his own, and his estranged daughter moved away and cut contact with the man. It had been his dream to pass the farm down through the family, but without that option he instead gave the deed to Lewis, with the only stipulation being that he gave it to someone who needed it. I know seeing the farm waste away is a sad sight, but the old man was clear on how the property should be handled, and giving it to two kids down on their luck is exactly what he would have wanted, and you know it. George didn't offer a rebuttal beyond a small oomph, so Lewis turned his focus to Robin, the local carpenter. Any idea on how long it will take to get the house ready for two people? The orange-haired woman expected such a request from the moment he announced the two would be moving into town and already had an answer ready. That old house is in pretty good condition considering the years. I could have it ready by the 1st of spring if I rush it. The mayor was satisfied with her answer and made a mental note to compensate her well for the sudden job. With that out of the way, there's only one more thing to address, but I feel Harvey can explain things better than I can. Lewis stepped aside as the crowd turned towards Harvey, who cleared his throat while pulling out some notes. Due to some potential exposure to magic, although the exact situation is unclear, both Izuku and Kyoka have, for lack of a better term, changes to their bodies. Normally I would not disclose the details of my patients, but both have given their consent for this information to be shared, as they feel it would be better to inform everyone at once. Kyoka has the most notable change with two prehensile limbs at the end of her ears that resemble headphone cords, while Izuku has a much higher bone and muscle density, to the point his own strength can break his bones. This news got a few murmurs about the two, mostly concern about exactly how the boy found that last fact out, before Alex loudly exclaimed, "No wonder that guy was so heavy. I gotta find out his diet plan, dude must need a lot of protein for." As Alex continued his musing on his new workout buddy, whether Izuku knew it or not, Harvey tried to regain the floor to continue speaking. On that topic, with the exception of a sensitivity to loud noises and an increase in protein intake respectively, the two have received a clean bill of health and should be discharged soon. Harvey put away his writings and went to go sit down and let Lewis continue, only to be immediately approached by Demetrius, Robin's husband, and a local biologist. While his specialization was in the fauna and flora of Stardew Valley, his mind couldn't rest until he knew the how and why of such drastic changes occurring in the human body. Lewis called the meeting adjourned, while the townspeople left to continue whatever their day called for. Most made a mental note to visit the two in Harvey's clinic to welcome them to Pelican Town. It was only neighborly after all. While several people formed ideas about potential welcoming gifts or wondering how well they would get along with the town, Lewis prepared to float his idea to the two and made his way to the clinic. "How would you two like to own a farm?" Neither Izuku nor Kyoka were expecting Lewis to be so generous as to offer property for the two to live on, much less for free. But while they were immensely grateful for his kindness, they did have some reservations with the news. "Do we look like farmers?" was the first thing out of Kyoka's mouth, perhaps a slight bit ruder than she intended. "I don't know the first thing about farming, and I'm going to take a gamble and say green bean over there doesn't either." "Green bean?" Izuku quietly said, unnoticed by the other two. "Oh please." The previous owner didn't know a lick of farming when he got the propriety, and he turned an old patch of dirt into the shining jewel of this town. Lewis seemed to beam with pride, recounting the glory days of Pelican Town. "Besides, it's not like you have to farm. Practically anywhere you look you can make a living off the valley. Fishing, mining, heck with the forage, you could take a walk through the forest and turn a profit for the day." "Why does it feel like he's selling us something?" the two heroes thought at the same time, before Izuku turned to Kyoka. "Well, it's not like we have many other options. Plus, we're training to fight villains on a daily basis. I think we can handle growing some crops while we wait for whatever quirk hit us to wear off." A soft groan escaped Kyoka's lips, but with no real annoyance behind it. "How dare you use logic on me, Izuku? I thought I could trust you." The two shared a small laugh while Lewis took that as her acceptance. "Well, I'm glad that Gregory finally got his last wish," he said to himself and stood to leave the room. "Our local carpenter is fixing up the house on the property, and she should be done on the 1st of spring. Harvey wanted to keep you two until then anyway, said he should be getting what he needs to run his last test tomorrow." The two bid farewell to Lewis and went back to entertaining themselves, which in a hospital room meant reading, talking to each other, or staring at the clock. The next day was much more exciting for the two, as Harvey finally received the necessary devices to perform brain scans on the two and received assistance by a scientist who introduced himself as Demetrius. While the two, to quote Kyoka, nerded out over the scan results, a large number of people came to introduce themselves and welcome them to the valley. A kind old lady and a rather grumpy old man introduced themselves as Evelyn and George, who gave the two a plate of fresh cookies and a demand to treat that old farm right. respectfully, and soon after a trio of young adults, around a few years older the Izuku and Kyoka. I guess it would be around 10 here, Izuku thought. The blonde was named Sam, the dark-haired boy Sebastian, and the fellow purple-head Abigail. When Kyoka asked about the nearest music store, which was in a place called Zuzu City, the group seemed to perk up. They were interested in starting a band and had begun to learn to play some instruments, and Sam asked if the two were interested in practicing together. After a push from Izuku, who was interested as he had heard practicing guitar would be good physical therapy for his fingers, Kyoka agreed and the five planned a time. Clint, the town blacksmith, came by to drop off some tools to farm and mine with, saying if they wanted to pay him back then to buy form his store. Wiley, the man who found them, dropped off some old fishing poles and live bait. Thankfully in a sealed container. Demetrius, after stopping by his home for lunch, came back with a book on beginners farming for the two, and soon after Pierre, the owner of the local store, offered some free seeds, to personally show the quality compared to JojaMart seeds. Despite the fact that neither of the two knew what a JojaMart was. A few smaller welcoming gifts came in throughout the day. A cookbook from the owner of the saloon, Gus, a selection of teas from a woman named Caroline, and a welcoming card signed in a messy scrawl by Vincent and Jazz, and in a much neater handwriting Penny, who Izuku and Kyoka found out was the local tutor. The last gift of the day came from a girl with blue hair and a bubbly attitude, Emily. She came with a bag containing new clothes for the two. Izuku and Kyoka were immensely grateful, seeing as they both only possessed a single school uniform for clothing. Emily was a skilled tailor, and the clothes were not only durable to stand up to the stresses of farming but comfortable and rather stylish. Kyoka asked how she managed to get their sizes right without meeting them, but Emily only responded that she was told in a dream. Izuku argued that in a world that apparently has magic, it didn't seem such an odd explanation, to which Kyoka once again cursed his foul logic reasoning. Without any other further visitors, the two got ready for the next day. While neither knew just how long they would be in this strange place, they were at least glad they would be surrounded by good people. You know, when the mayor said it was an old farm, I was expecting worn-down fences and dirt, not this, Kyoka said while gesturing to the scene before her. Stretched out before the two was what could be called a farm in the loosest sense, the years of disuse leaving the property covered in weeds, trees, old logs, and somehow entire boulders. It was difficult to even see where the end of the property was and where the surrounding forest began. The ruins of what was once a greenhouse sat near the main house, which was the only thing that looked remotely new. Robin was true to her word that she could renovate the home rather quickly. Izuku knew that today would be an active one, but he expected to be busy tilling soil and sowing seeds. With a small sigh, he resigned himself instead to a monotonous day of clearing weeds and uprooting trees. At least it would be good practice using one for all. After several hours, Izuku had cleared around half of the property, finding out rather quickly that his own body and quirk were better suited to removing the large, gnarled logs and dense boulders than the tools he had on hand, while Kyoka finished planting and watering the seeds Pierre had given them. Both were rather tired but had become accustomed to such a feeling after the many intense days of hero training at UA. A little farm work wouldn't be enough to stop the two. After placing the fallen trees and broken stone near the house to be used later, the two new farmers elected to retire for the night. The house was far from spacious but was more than enough for their needs. The largest room was a mix between a surprisingly well-equipped kitchen and a furnished living room. Connected by a short hallway, the next room was a single bedroom, luckily coming with a divider for privacy, and a bathroom. Ugh, remind me why we let Lewis talk us into this again? Kyoka mumbled out. Barley heard as she flopped face down on her bed. Because 1, we both need a place to stay, 2, a way to make money, and 3, this was the only open property in town? Izuku shot back. It was odd, but while a few days ago he would have been a stuttering mess when talking to any of his classmates beyond his own group of friends, he found himself able to relax around the punk girl. Even though she's really attractive. And cool. And a traitorous part of his brain whispered before he forcefully stamped it down. The last thing Izuku wanted was to make the situation awkward between them. Besides, there's no way someone as great as Kyoka would think of me the same way, he thought, unaware of the similar crisis occurring in Kyoka's mind. She knew he was strong, and probably had built some muscle with his training, but nothing had prepared Kyoka from watching the shy wallflower that Izuku was rip a tree from the ground with one arm and heft it over his shoulder like one would a baseball bat. It seemed Izuku was full of these surprises, from the battle trial during their first heroics class, the sports festival, and most recently his fight with Overhaul. The meek boy seemed to pull moments of boundless determination and intense strength out of nowhere. Now knowing about how Izuku spent most of his life effectively quirkless only made Kyoka all the more impressed that Izuku could still be so kind and considerate and, well, Izuku. Trying and failing to get the image of Izuku working to clear the field from her head, Kyoka would admit to herself that maybe, just maybe, she might be attracted to the cinnamon roll she was sharing a room with. Not like it would matter, she thought to herself. There's no way someone like Izuku would notice me that way. With the evening giving way to night, both prepared to rest for a new day of more labor. While eager to return to their old lives and friends with all the stresses they entailed, both Izuku and Kyoka would both find themselves having pleasant dreams filled with living a quiet life on the farm with the other by their side. A dream they would be living out for much longer than either one expected. The first week after Izuku and Kyoka had moved into the farm was something of a learning experience for the two. While the book gifted by Demetrius was a great help, reading about crop rotation and how to till soil did little to prepare one for the actual experience that was running a farm. Neither one was about to let a little problem like inexperience stop them. However, UA pushed the motto of plus ultra, after all, and the two certainly had enough motivation to make up the difference. After the land was cleared and all the crops planted, the heroes found themselves with ample time on their hands. While Izuku searched for an area that would be better suited for training his quirk, Kyoka decided to explore the town to familiarize herself. The excursion was short. Pelican Town was a far cry from a metropolis like Tokyo, but right before Kyoka made for the mountains to see how Izuku was faring, she stumbled upon a dilapidated building next to a small park. Lewis stood out front, with a dejected look on his face. Once filled with activity, the community center now sat abandoned and forgotten, an eyesore of an otherwise idyllic town. Lewis had received some offers to purchase the building from the local JojaMart representative Morris, but he had turned them all down. Out of curiosity, Kyoka asked the mayor for a look inside, and found the inside to be even worse off. A broken fish tank had leaked water everywhere, causing large areas of the wooden floor to have rotted away. Vegetation grew through the exposed dirt and cracks in the wall, and the supports seemed keen to give way at a moment's notice. Even stranger, an odd stone hut with a roof of leaves sat in the corner, which Lewis chalked up to the work of Vincent and Jazz. Kyoka had her doubts. Even though she met the two only in passing, she didn't peg either of them to have the patience to build the small hut. As the mayor left, Kyoka decided to explore the rest of the building, hoping to find a better explanation for the mysterious hut. Most of the rooms had nothing new, but what was once a crafts room contained a golden tablet that seemed to be recently placed, and on it a language Kyoka had never seen before. After looking over the strange tablet and finding nothing else noteworthy, Kyoka turned to leave. While she thought of the best person or place to find more on the oddity, out of the corner of her eye she saw something bright green and small move, but upon turning to get a better look it had vanished. She doubted it was a rat due to its coloration, although a voice that sounded suspiciously like Izuku said that rats might be green in this world, and despite her best efforts, Kyoka could not find another one of the little creatures in the old community center. By the time she abandoned her search, the day had nearly come to an end, and after a simple dinner both farmers went to bed early to get a head start on their work tomorrow, while Kyoka decided to get more answers about the strange happenings in the community center. Hey Kyoka, do you know why a wizard is sending us mail about a rat problem? Or it seems answers will come to her. After a brief recounting of her time in the old building, Izuku was left just as confused as Kyoka was, and decided to accompany her to visit Rasmodius. The morning passed quickly, both farmers working to finish their daily chores as fast as possible. Soon the two were finished and passed the short walk through the forest in a comfortable silence. The residence of the wizard was easy to spot, the large stone tower rising high above the tree line, And before long the farmers found themselves standing in front of the entrance. After a knock on the door with no response, Kyoka tested the handle and found the door unlocked. Izuku voiced a concern to simply come back some other time, not wishing to be cursed for coming in uninvited. Well, he did invite us, and if he didn't want people to come inside, he shouldn't have left the door unlocked. While Izuku couldn't find a fault in her words, they did little to soothe the growing fear he would be spending the rest of his life as a frog or other such creature. She is right about my invitation. The words broke Izuku out of his thoughts before he cursed himself for muttering out loud. The man in front of them looked the part of a wizard, wearing long robes decorated with odd talismans. The only part that seemed off was an odd cowboy hat of black leather with a purple band. Izuku kept his thoughts on the wizard's choice in headgear to himself. Rasmodius stirred a large cauldron with bubbling green liquid inside before he continued to speak. Besides, I wouldn't waste the resources necessary for transmutation on a simple home invader. Far too costly. Deciding to ignore his comment, Kyoka decided to jump right to the topic of his letter, the rat problem in the community center. Yes. The creature you saw that day was actually a type of forest spirit called a Junimo. Rasmodius continued his lesson on the small creatures without breaking focus on his brew. They have inhabited the forest surrounding the town from the time before the town was built. With the abandonment of the community center allowing nature to reclaim the building, the Junimos have likely decided to move in. They find abandoned settlements fascinating. After whipping out a notebook, with such speed even Rasmodius was briefly shocked from his task, Izuku recorded all the wizard told him, hoping to take back knowledge of the fascinating practices and creatures if when he and Kyoka returned to Japan. Well, it's a shame we can't help rebuild the center without displacing them. It's not like they did anything wrong. The Junimos just found an interesting place to live. Not so, Rasmodius interrupted, while pouring his concoction into 2 cups. Did you happen to find a form of golden scroll or tablet in the building? Kyoka nodded in confirmation. Those are the Junimos' way of asking for assistance. If you decide to help them with their requests, the Junimos are likely to repay in kind. This is actually the reason why I have called you here. By helping the Junimos, they will provide their assistance to the town in a form of symbiosis. The only problem being few alive can claim to understand their language. Rasmodius handed both cups to the 2 farmers. This potion will allow you to speak their language. I cannot force you to help them, I merely ask that you consider doing so. After some deliberation, Kyoka downed her cup. The liquid was thick and viscous, the taste reminding her of a mix of pine tar and fresh grass. Soon her vision was filled with nothing but the color green and natural flora, and her skull felt like it was about to burst from the knowledge being forced inside. While Kyoka was having a bad trip, Izuku had set his cup down to continue his writing. The idea of a potion that could be used to learn a language was fascinating, and his mind shot forth with a myriad of questions on the possibilities. Would it work with all languages or only those of magical beings? Could any knowledge be passed down? Did the person making the potion have to know the information beforehand? Was the information permanent or could it be forgotten? His writing was interrupted by Rasmodius grabbing his scarred, crooked right hand while looking it over. To gain such injuries despite being so young, may I ask how you injured yourself to this degree? Oh, well, it was sort of a couple incidents combined. I was competing in a festival tournament, and my opponent, Todoroki, well, I can't really tell the specifics, it's not my place to. He was trying to prove a point to someone, but he was only hurting himself. I managed to convince him during our fight, but in the end, I needed some intense surgery in my hand. The second time was when a serial killer tried to murder a boy. I managed to stop him, but my arm was broken so severely that I have permanent ligament damage. Any more breaks and I could lose function completely. Rasmodius carefully inspected the boy's face during his story but did not find the slightest bit of deceit. To sacrifice his own safety for not only the life but mental well-being of others was admirable. Rasmodius considered his next actions after seeing the state of his arm, but hearing his tale erased any doubt in his mind. The wizard picked up Izuku's cup, causing some concern in the boy who thought he did something wrong. Instead of cursing him or loudly shouting to leave while blasting him with magic, as all angry wizards did, instead Rasmodius took a minute to find some more potion ingredients. After some time preparing and adding the strange collection of herbs and fungi he gathered, the potion in Izuku's cup was now a faint pink compared to the forest green it was. This should help with your arm as well as let you understand the Junimos. Drink it quickly, however, the potion goes bad quickly. With a quick itadakimasu, Izuku downed the potion, only to find the wizard quickly forcing a strip of leather into his mouth. Before he could begin to question the reason for this, an effect similar to the one Kyoka experienced started to take hold, only for the dancing visions and pounding skull to be instantly replaced with the sheer agony that consumed his arm. Clutching the limb to his chest, Izuku could feel the bones in his hand forcefully rearrange themselves and felt the combined pain of all the previous breaks in his arm hit at once. Finally, the universe decided to give a faint mercy to the boy, and Izuku's consciousness faded. He awoke sometime later to find himself on his back and kneeling beside him a concerned Kyoka, who immediately wrapped him into a hug. "I didn't expect you to awake for a few hours more." Izuku turned his head to see the wizard, standing from what looked like a spot for meditation. "My apologies for not telling you the pain the potion would cause, but I have found even with warning no one truly grasps the repercussions. The more damage one receives, the more pain one must endure. Your injuries were right on the threshold where the potion would do more harm than good." Izuku was left with mixed feelings about the experience. Pain was too weak a word for the suffering he had felt, but now that he had recovered, he felt. No, even better than fine. The phantom aches in his arm he had long grown accustomed to had completely vanished. The scarring in his arm was completely gone. Even the smaller aches from past injuries on other parts of his body had simply disappeared without a trace. Thanks. Yes. For fixing my arm, Izuku said while shifting his body to sit up, oblivious to the now blushing girl by his side. "But why did you help in the first place?" The wizard gave a small smile. "Consider it an incentive to carry out my request in aiding the Junimos." The two thanked Rasmodius for his assistance, even if Kyoka did say she would vibrate him so hard he would liquefy, if he ever did such a stunt again, to which the wizard only gave a small chuckle. The farmers walked back to their property, while Izuku flexed and felt his arm in amazement. In truth, Izuku was already on board to help the forest spirits. He wouldn't be a good hero otherwise, but he wouldn't turn down having his body restored to peak condition. Even with the repercussions. Kyoka was busy piecing together the little information she heard while the effects of the potion wore off her. All of her class could tell Izuku and Todoroki were having much more than a simple tournament fight during the sports festival. Knowing that the heterochromatic boy didn't use his fire out of desperation, but because Izuku managed to save him from whatever bitterness was consuming him, well, knowing Izuku, it wasn't really a surprise. After a day filled with lectures on magical creatures and potion-induced blackouts, the farmer duo retired for the night, deciding to check the abandoned community center tomorrow. "Come on, Kyoka, I finally found the perfect place to train our quirks." Izuku's excitement was always a welcome sight for Kyoka, but she would rather such excitement come sometime in the PM. Or at least after 8 a.m. Outside, the sky was covered in clouds with rain pouring down. With the weather taking care of irrigation for the day, and no plants needing to be harvested, Izuku elected to explore the surrounding area while Kyoka got some much welcome sleep, before the green-haired farmer ran into the house shortly after he left, almost earning him a jack in the neck for his trouble. Izuku wouldn't listen to such responses as, "Please let me sleep," and, "I'm sure the spot will still be there tomorrow." And so Kyoka found herself headed to the mountains in the morning while being drenched from the rain. "I still don't know why we can't just practice in the mines. That place has actual things to fight." Plus, the ores and gemstones they found were rather profitable, as despite going on to their third week of farming, they had made quite a profit from their finds. "I mean, I did consider it, but well." Izuku slammed a fist into a cave bat that attempted to swoop down on him from above, sending it careening into the cavern as its death cries echoed off the walls. Quickly sidestepping a mole-like creature that attempted to burrow up from under him, Izuku grabbed and yanked it from the ground before throwing it at a giant flying insect, both dying upon impact. Behind him, Kyoka had 2 slimes in front of her and jabbed a jack into each, before pumping enough of her heartbeat that the gelatinous monsters were reduced to stains on the walls. The monsters there aren't really that difficult. Plus, if I use too much of my quirk or you're too intense with your vibrations, we might risk a cave-in. Kyoka had to concede both points, as their training to become heroes was much more intense than anything they had faced in the mines so far, and dying from being crushed alive sounded like a poor way to go. The two walked further into the mountains, passing the large mountaintop lake and the entrance to the mines. Soon Izuku had led Kyoka to a broken bridge past the east side of the lake, beyond which resided an old stone quarry. "This is the spot," Izuku exclaimed with a wide smile on his face. "So, you got me up and dragged me through the rain because you just had to show me an old quarry?" "Yep." The boy responded, oblivious to the sarcasm in her voice. "It's perfect. I can practice using more of my quirk to carry and break stone, and you can practice breaking denser materials with your vibrations. Plus, I'm pretty sure I saw some or deposits and gemstones too, so we're still making a profit while training." Kyoka had to admit the location was a good one, well suited to training both their skill sets. But there was one small problem that Izuku seemed to miss. "The bridge is out." In lieu of a response, Izuku simply charged up one for all, picked up Kyoka bridal style, and leaped across the broken bridge in a single bound. At first shaken from the sudden action, Kyoka jabbed a jack into his neck while hoping that Izuku didn't notice the blush that had spread across her face. "All right, smarts, next time at least warn me before you do that." Despite her tone, Kyoka didn't mind his actions. And it seemed from the small laugh he gave while rubbing his neck, neither did Izuku. "Ugh, remind me why I let you drag me to this." Sebastian was far from his element. He preferred the confines of his room where he worked as a freelance programmer, or spending time with Sam and Abigail, the two people he felt closest with in town. He absolutely did not enjoy the uncomfortable suit and forced social interaction that came with the flower dance, the absolute worst town festival, in Sebastian's humble opinion. "Because you wanted to see if Sam asked Penny to dance, as a friend, yet again?" Abigail stood next to him, clearly as uncomfortable with the traditional white dress as Sebastian was with his attire. Seriously, literally everyone can tell he likes her except for themselves. It's infuriating sometimes. A notion Sebastian readily agreed with. There couldn't be a pair more oblivious to how they really felt than those two. Only for his inner dialogue to be corrected as the two. New farmers arrived at the event grounds. Kyoka and Izuku were cool to hang out with, separately at least. Kyoka was impressive when it came to musical talent and a good instructor. After less than a month of practicing, the three-man band had improved so much the difference was night and day. Izuku was a bundle of nerves on a good day, but somehow this worked in his favor to make him endearing in a way. It didn't hurt he was surprisingly good at Solar Ion Chronicles, the game either. But together, the constant poorly hidden blushes and not-so-sneaky glances whenever they had to occupy space within 5 feet of each other left Sebastian honestly amazed at how long the two could go without one realizing their feelings were reciprocated. It felt a little hypocritical, as it took Sebastian and Abigail a week of constant dancing around the other to finally do something about their own feelings, but this train wreck between the farmers had been going on for nearly a month. It had seemed as though Abigail had similar thoughts, and decided it was time to take matters into her own hands. "Hey Seb, I think I have a plan to help those two out." Sebastian groaned both at the uncreative pet name and the prospect of more social interaction, but still agreed to her plan. If it got those two to stop with the shy, blushing schoolgirl acts, then it was worth it. "Hey guys." Izuku and Kyoka looked over to see Abigail and Sebastian, wearing a dress and blue suit that clearly neither were comfortable with. "Did you come to join the dance today or just come to watch?" Truth be told, neither had an idea of what the festival entailed. The egg festival was quite similar to Easter with decorated eggs and egg scavenger hunts, but neither wanted to make assumptions, as beyond something to do with flowers and dancing, there was a lot of room for interpretation. "No, we just decided to hang back and see what it's like. Neither of us really knew what to expect today," said Kyoka. "Plus, I doubt you would be able to get me in one of those dresses." The two purple-haired girls shared a laugh, before Abigail gave a look to Sebastian and started to work her plan. Well, even if you aren't part of the main dance, are you still going to dance together? I know a lot of the couples in town use today as an excuse to be all romantic together. Her words had their intended effect as both Izuku and Kyoka felt a blush creep over their faces and made to deny their involvement. Not. I mean, what gave, we're not together. I don't know what he's. I'm not dating him. Sebastian took this as his cue to speak up. Oh? I could have sworn you two were dating. Izuku started to frantically wave his hands while denying such claims, while Kyoka had completely frozen up with the exception of her earjacks, which were currently spazzing out in random directions. It took nearly 15 seconds for Izuku to manage to form a coherent sentence, wwL we're and not, before trying desperately to find anything to do that wasn't continuing this conversation. So if one of you wanted to go out, you wouldn't say yes? The sadistic grin on her face went unnoticed by the oblivious pair, but Sebastian felt a shiver go down his spine. His girlfriend could be scary sometimes. I mean I would be honored, but you can't as seriously think someone as great as Kyoka Thug? Izuku is great and all, but he'd never feel that way about someone like. Silence overtook the two as they both struggled to comprehend what they had both heard. Izuku's mouth stilled while his mind raced a mile a minute. She thinks I'm great? But why wouldn't I want to date someone like her? She's amazing and talented and I'm just me. Kyoka did not fare much better. He would be honored? But all the girls in the class would go out with him if he asked. Hell, half the girls in school look at him like he's the next coming of All Might, and he likes me. While Izuku and Kyoka simply gawked at each other in a mixture of confusion, amazement and elation, Abigail felt it was time to leave the two alone. Well, now we won't have to deal with those two shying around each other all the time. Good thing they weren't as dense as Sam. Sebastian agreed that it would be a welcome change before a terrible thought occurred. I don't think we thought this through all the way. Abigail stopped to look at him in confusion. What do you mean? Clearly my plan worked. Sebastian shook his head. It's not the plan that's concerning me. The dark-haired boy looked to Abigail with a grave, almost fearful expression. What if they're one of those super mushy couples that do everything together? Oh no. Izuku and Kyoka had decided to leave the festival early, deciding a public venue would not be the right place for the conversation they needed to have. As the two walked back to the farm, they decided the pier extending into the forest lake was private enough. As they sat down, neither one still dared to look at the other directly or speak up, insecurities flaring up to make both think the whole situation was some elaborate prank. Eventually, after what felt like hours of sitting in silence, Izuku spoke up. Did you really mean what you said back there? Yeah. Did you? Yes. A new wave of silence overtook the two, only for Kyoka to speak up first. Why me? Out of all the questions that could have been asked, this was one he didn't expect. What do you mean? I mean, out of all the girls in the class, hell, all the girls in school, any one of them would jump at the chance to go out with you. Ochako isn't even subtle about how much she likes you, so why do you think I'm so great? I'm just the flat-chested tomboy who likes music. Even Toru gets more attention from the guys and she's invisible. I just can't understand why. Kyoka's self-loathing filled rant was interrupted by Izuku grabbing her hand. Kyoka, please look at me. After wiping tears she didn't realize were forming, she lifted her gaze up at the verdinette. First of all, you're one of the most attractive girls I've ever met. I don't care if every single guy in the world or even you disagree with me, I think you're beautiful. The earnestness in Izuku's voice made Kyoka's heart nearly burst from her chest and her stomach twist into knots, but he kept going. You're not just the music girl, you're an amazing hero and the coolest person I've met. Anyone would be lucky to be with you. I just don't know what I did to make you feel that way about me. It baffled Kyoka how a guy as great as Izuku could say in one breath how much he was amazed by her only to put himself down in the next, and she didn't like that attitude coming from his mouth. So, she decided to do something about it. Izuku, you are the most heroic guy at UA. You're not only one of the best in class, but you're constantly helping everyone with their work. You risked your life to save that kid from muscular at the summer camp, and you saved Todoroki from whatever was eating at him. Hell, you even managed to make Bakugo respect you. Even if only barely. A small laugh left Izuku's lips. Kyoka could listen to it forever, but she had to finish her point. Even before we got to know each other better, I don't think there is any other guy in class I would rather have been sent here with. And if getting hit with some weird quirk is what it took to finally realize how much I love you, then I don't mind. Kyoka was just as surprised at the word, love, coming from her mouth as the man in front of her, but she didn't feel any other word would do what she felt for Izuku justice. I'm glad you felt the same way, Kyoka. I love you too. Neither of the two would remember who it was that moved in first, but both remember what happened after. As Kyoka and Izuku's lips met, the faint sound of the forest faded away, and for a few brief, wonderful seconds, the only thing that existed to the couple was each other. It wasn't a deep kiss or a particularly long one, but it was enough for them. The two separated, before spending the rest of the day holding each other on the small pier, lost to their own little world. They didn't know how long their time in Pelican Town would be, but they would forever be grateful for what it brought. Attention, classmates! Midnight Sensei has just informed me that she has identified the quirk Midoriya and Jiro were affected by. Ida's words grabbed the attention of the rest of Class 1A. While everyone kept their nerves during the incident, the class couldn't help but worry now that there was no active threat. After arriving back at the dorms, Ida was pulled aside by Midnight to inform him about the details of the situation and tasking the class representative with keeping the class calm. The quirk has a duration of 5 hours, after which the two will be returned to the spot they had vanished from. The news was a great relief for the class, with Izuku's closely knit friend group in particular breathing a heavy sigh of relief. I have also been informed that Midoriya and Jiro's family will be brought to the dorms to await their return with us. As such, we must show them the high standard to which we at UA hold ourselves. I have organized a cleaning list to be. As Ida attempted to corral the class into cleaning the dorms top to bottom, Class 1, as resident acid girl, Ishido Mina couldn't help but feel off. Normally, she had a sixth sense for romance that she used to attempt to get her classmates together, but ever since the incident at the mall she's had this growing feeling. Almost like a relationship had formed between two close friends, and she didn't even get to help the two get together. It's probably nothing. Alright, I'll get work started on the silo first thing tomorrow, and the coop after that. The summer heat came in quickly to the valley, practically overnight. It was still somewhat jarring to the two farmers how quickly the seasons shifted, but they were quick to adjust. Izuku had the foresight to prepare for the coming summer, and with the help of Maru, installed an irrigation system to their farmland. The added sprinklers didn't totally remove the need to water the crops, but it did help take a load off of the two, allowing for more effort to be focused elsewhere, such as animal husbandry. Kyoka was currently busy at Marnie's ranch, the woman offering to teach how to build all manner of items, from kegs to cheese presses. While the purple-haired girl was taught in the ways of the rancher, her boyfriend went to Robin's to commission the buildings necessary for raising animals, as well as a few new additions to the house. I also have some furniture already made, so I can have the new double bed brought to your house by tonight. The carpenter said with a knowing smirk. Izuku quickly made himself scarce, not willing to be subjected to such teasing. He already got enough from his new friends, the last thing he needed was their parents getting in on it as well. At least none of them are as bad as Ishido. The thought of his classmates stopped the boy in his tracks. The time had flown by, but it had been over a month since the incident at the mall. As much as Izuku liked Pelican Town, he still had a home in Japan, another life and a mission waiting for him to return. What was Shigaraki doing during the hero's absence? What plans were being created to see the downfall of society? Goddamn it. Twice, where did you put my F&D controllers? I haven't even touched them, asked Dabi. I hope he melted them. After taking a minute to shake the thought from his head, Izuku continued his walk to the town library. Worrying about things out of his control wouldn't do any good, and he had faith that even without himself and Kyoka, his friends were strong enough to handle whatever comes their way until they returned. And they would. He just had to keep thinking. As he entered the library, Izuku took a spare moment to look over the collection of gems and artifacts. Where once stood empty display cases as the previous collection had been entirely lost, but now the glass contained a small trove of precious stones, gems, geodes, and old artifacts. It was far from a complete restoration, but it was a solid start. Penny entered the building while Izuku admired the growing showcase and began to organize and prepare for another day of tutoring. Pelican Town was without a proper school, and the nearest town was too far of a commute to be practical in the long term, even before the failure of the local bus. Penny decided to take it upon herself to provide an education to the two children of the village, Vincent and Jazz. Laws concerning education seemed much more lax compared to Japan. As long as the children were able to pass examinations to show they understood the information, the Ferngill Republic did not bother with enforcing attendance to a licensed school. "Hello there, Izuku." "Oh, hello. Sorry I didn't notice you come in." The green-haired boy responded. "It's all right. I was actually wondering, are you busy today?" A quick shake of his head confirmed he was not. "In that case, would you be willing to help tutor again? Vincent seemed to pick up the last math lesson quicker with your help." "Of course, I don't mind. How long until they get here? I can go home and grab some supplies." Penny was quick to stop him. "That's all right, I brought more than enough. We'll start with math today. I know you offered to help, but I won't keep you long." It wasn't long before Jazz, Marnie's niece, entered. She was initially shy of the two new residents, but after mustering the courage to ask Kyoka about her cool ear dangles, the two hit it off. Some time with Izuku during her tutoring helped warm her up to the young farmer as well. Vincent arrived a few minutes after Jazz, and his solemn face lit up at seeing Izuku would be helping again today. The lesson went by quickly. Even if the history was entirely new and the reading unfamiliar, math would always be math, and Izuku considered it to be among best subjects. Right below Hero Law. As Izuku made to leave, Penny stopped him before the door. "Are you going to be busy tomorrow?" "Not beyond the usual, but I thought you didn't tutor tomorrow?" he asked with a hint of confusion. "I'm not, but I planned a small educational field trip to the forest tomorrow. It's really just going to be a picnic while I quiz them on natural science, and I wanted to know if you or Kyoka would like to join us." "Well, I don't know about Kyoka, but I'd love to," Izuku said with a large grin on his face. As Penny told him the planned time and left to get back to her lesson, Izuku let his mind wander to tomorrow. A nice relaxing lunch with friends sounded like a perfect break for the two farmers. "Hey there, Kyoka, Izuku." Gus' friendly greeting was loud enough to cut through the commotion of the small crowd in the saloon. While she preferred to cook her own meals, today Kyoka and Izuku decided to have their dinner at the Stardrop Saloon, both from not wanting to put forth the effort of preparing their own food, but also a desire to interact with the community. The last few days were dominated by a rainstorm, and while it meant the two farmers did not have to spend the effort of watering their fields, with most of the town not wanting to brave the weather, Izuku and Kyoka had little interaction with people beyond each other. With the rain finally letting up, the two decided it would be a good idea to spend some time at the small saloon. A very popular sentiment it seemed, as what felt like half the town had the same idea. After battling their way to the counter, the two placed an order, a large salad with a side of grilled salmon each. Fish was actually a large part of most people's diets in the valley, as most farms in the area only raised animals for products such as wool and milk, not for slaughter. That wasn't to say the entire area was pescatarian, but with the local farm practices meaning meat products had to be imported in, most people only had meat for special occasions and town events. Luckily, the Famers had little trouble adjusting, but Izuku would admit it was hard going without his favorite meal of katsudon on a regular basis. The only seats not taken were two bar seats near the register Gus used to do business, and with some reluctance, the Famers sat down. There wasn't anything wrong with the spots themselves, no localized drafts, annoying glares, or wobbly stools. The problem was with how close they were to Gus. The owner of the saloon was all in all a great guy, generous to his neighbors and always ready to offer a hand to those in need, but well, "Are you too excited for the luau? Out of all the festivals it's one of my favorites, and not just for the communal soup pot. While everyone pitches into the potluck and the soup, every year I make this special glazed ham that's a hit with the town. I'll have to make sure to save some for you too, my treat." I get the meat from a friend in Zuzu City who runs a butcher shop. Even with a discount the ham cost a pretty penny, but I can assure you, it's worth it. As for the glaze, I use peas from Ginger Island. He was passionate about his craft. A little too passionate. Izuku didn't mind so much, as he knew the feeling of being so absorbed in a passion that you can't help but talk on and on for hours, but by the second sentence Kyoka had tuned out. As she pretended to pay full attention, a skill the girl had picked up in middle school and mastered at you, Kyoka let her mind wander. She knew her boyfriend was worried about returning to Japan, or more accurately, the possibility of not returning at all. To be honest, the idea of just waiting for the effect to wear off had always seemed a bit flimsy to her, and if whatever quirk that warped the two worked like that, then surely it would have worn off by now. The only reason Kyoka allowed herself to believe that someday soon the two would be returned to Japan was because, well, she was scared. Scared about never seeing her friends again. Scared of the thought of her parents mourning for her without even a body to bury. Scared that the League of Villains would make another move to hurt the people close to her, and she wouldn't even know. But as the days passed, it started to solidify the idea that there was no return. Izuku did a good job of hiding it, but Kyoka had been around him long enough to see past the thin facade he put up. He had started throwing himself into working the farm and training, barely giving himself a moment to rest and dwell on the bigger picture. But with the last few days of rain, there wasn't enough for Izuku to do to totally occupy his mind, and it showed. Kyoka didn't know how to approach the topic, as she didn't even want to admit the possibility of never returning to herself, much less out loud. So she didn't. After that depressing train of thought, Kyoka finished her meal shortly after Izuku did, and mingled a bit to take her mind off of things. Even if she was stuck here, at least she wasn't alone. She had new friends, a stable source of income, and a boyfriend that had the personality of a cinnamon roll and the strength to shatter glaciers with a flick of a finger. All things considered, she could be worse off. The farmers paid for their meals and said goodbye to their friends before making their way back home. Spending some time curled up together on the sofa while watching whatever was on TV would do them both some good, help put the thoughts of not coming back on hold, even if only for a night. It had become something of a ritual to end the day by simply enjoying each other's presence, with a movie or radio to provide background noise. A daily tradition Kyoka wasn't keen on changing. If Izuku had a single G for every time his right arm was engulfed in sheer agony after being brought to Pelican Town, he'd have 2G. Which was surprisingly little considering his track record of breaking limbs in the past. But unlike the shattered limbs of the past or even the wizard's potion, where he at least knew what had caused such pain, right now he had no clue what was happening. The day had started out like any other: wake up, eat breakfast, tend the farm, until the two farmers decided to go spelunking in the mines. A couple days ago they had reached a new section of the caverns, with the frigid cold and ice giving way to an uncomfortable heat. The two tried to be careful with this new area. While the monsters still posed little threat, they were getting noticeably tougher, and going in overconfident could be disastrous. Izuku was occupied by what looked like a vaguely humanoid mass of shadow wearing a wooden tribal mask when he heard Kyoka cry out. He turned to see his girlfriend knocked to the floor by a larger shadow person that had snuck up on her, and quickly moved to her side. In reality, Kyoka wasn't severely injured and would only suffer a large bruise where the creature struck, but in the rush of the situation all Izuku could see was the woman he loved suffering. Until his vision went red, and a wave of anger overtook him. Izuku had been angry before, but this was different from the anger he felt from being mocked most of his life for being quirkless or learning the abuse Overhaul put Eri through, which helped fuel his drive to change things for the better. This anger was all-consuming, flooding every part of his body until it felt like it would burst. And then it did. From his right hand, shadowy tendrils erupted and started writhing, thrashing, and destroying. The two shadow creatures barely had time to realize what was happening before being bisected and dissipating. Even with the threat gone, Izuku couldn't control whatever was happening to him, much less stop it. The only thought that cut through the pain was the fact that he was still near Kyoka, and put everything he had into making the black, shadowy mass avoid her. Kyoka, who hadn't had time to pick herself off the ground before whatever the hell this was left in shock. The black tendrils seemed to be avoiding her, but the same could not be said of the surrounding stone. As chunks of wall and ceiling were torn away with surprising ease, Izuku's whereabout triggering a cave-in seemed prophetic in hindsight. If Kyoka didn't do something soon, they would both be buried alive under a mountain of stone, but what could she do? Even if the black mass hadn't hit her yet, the way they cleaved through stone made approaching a very risky prospect. It was shameful to admit, but the situation had Kyoka frozen in her spot, unable to bring herself closer to help, and unwilling to leave Izuku. Until she saw his face. In her mind, Izuku's face was always a bright smile that lit up the room, or a look of absolute confidence, but now his face was twisted in a horrifying mix of pain and fear. And Kyoka's legs moved on their own. Either by exceptional skill or dumb luck, Kyoka closed the distance and wrapped her arms around the boy. Izuku. It's alright, I'm here. I'm fine. The sudden contact and her words seemed to help ground Izuku somewhat, as the thrashing became a little less intense. I know you're probably scared and hurting a lot, but we're going to be fine, just focus on my voice and what I'm saying. It was a bluff. For all she knew, the cave ceiling could come down at any moment, but if the choices were to save herself and abandon Izuku or stay and risk her life with every second, then there really wasn't a choice. By some miracle, the worst never came to pass. Despite the large amounts of damage, the cavern held strong as Kyoka tried everything she could think of to break Izuku out of whatever had taken hold of him. After a few minutes of calm assurances, breathing patterns, and grounding techniques, the odd shadowy mass no longer risked collapsing the cavern. It took half an hour before the tendrils had totally receded into the boy's arm. The moment they did, almost all the tension in the Verdinette's body left, and with the panic and adrenaline no longer flowing through his body, Izuku passed out. When Izuku awoke, he wasn't in the mines, or even anywhere in town, but an empty expanse. In front of him was a bald man who seemed vaguely familiar. Hey there, Nine. Hell of a way to get a new quirk, huh? New quirk? Izuku's mind was racing trying to figure out who this man was and what he meant when he realized he couldn't speak. Yeah, it's probably going to be like that for a while, but don't worry about it. Wait, can he read my thoughts? Yeah, not hard to do when I'm in your head after all. Name's Banjo Daigoro, the 5th user of One for All. Kyoka left the small entrance to the mines, straining to carry Izuku over her shoulder, while trying to gather her thoughts. While she may not have even completed her first year of hero schooling, the repeated villain attacks on Class 1A meant that Kyoka had become accustomed to life-or-death situations. After overcoming the initial shock that had her rooted to the ground, it was easy to push back her worries to the back of her mind for later. But it was later, and right now it felt like no amount of experience would help her get used to what came after a crisis like this. After the boy in her arms had passed out, she initially feared the worst, but a quick check of his pulse proved he was still alive. After slowly dragging her surprisingly heavy boyfriend to the elevator, then and only then did she allow herself the time to panic. She felt worse than she did after the USJ attack. While Shigaraki may have brought a Nomu, a bioengineered weapon designed to kill All Might, she never actually saw the fight between the monstrosity and her classmates. Kyoka knew some of her friends nearly died, but being told about an event and being there to see the people close to you almost die was quite a difference. And being there, in person, watching the person closest to her in terrible pain and practically begging for help, Kyoka had hesitated. I'm such a failure. None of the class would hesitate to help him. Izuku wouldn't hesitate to help anyone. I'm trying to be a hero, but I couldn't even move to help. The self-deprecating thoughts were cut off as Kyoka heard Izuku stir and begin to wake. She quickly moved to sit him up against a tree by the large mountain-top lake. Izuku woke slowly at first, trying to adjust his eyes to the light and work the stiffness from his muscles, before the memories of what happened before he had passed out caused him to snap wide awake while calling out, "Kyoka, are you?" His girlfriend grabbed him by the hand, putting a halt to his panic while trying her best to stay positive and confident. I'm not hurt, B, but you did scare me there for a minute, Mop Top. While Kyoka hoped being casual about the encounter would help alleviate any remaining tension, all her comment did was make Izuku even more concerned. Kyoka, I'm so sorry, I almost hurt you and I couldn't stop it from. Hey, calm down. You don't have to apologize to me. Kyoka knew that trying to stop Izuku from apologizing for something was like trying to hold back the concept of gravity, but she still tried every time. Izuku's eyes moved to look at the ground and his voice fell, But I could have hurt you, or worse. But you didn't, and I know you, Izuku. You wouldn't hurt a fly unless it was robbing a bank, and I know for sure you wouldn't hurt me. Besides, I'm the one that should be apologizing. Izuku was confused by her statement. He almost killed them both via a quirk accident and she was the one saying sorry? I don't understand, why are you apologizing? But it wasn't your fault, I know you tried your best to stop whatever the hell that was. The earphone jack user shouted out, and I couldn't move. I saw how much you were hurting and I hesitated. You throw yourself into anything to save people you don't even know and I just couldn't. But you did. Izuku moved closer to his distressed girlfriend. I was so scared, and I didn't even have an idea of what was happening or how to stop it. And then you ran in to help me. When you were there, I just felt like everything was going to be all right. You were a real hero. My hero. While his speech made Kyoka feel a little better about the situation, Izuku could tell she was still beating herself up for panicking. The two sat in silence for a moment, while he considered his next words, before the boy decided to speak up again. You know, I'm always scared when doing hero work. It. Kyoka wiped away tears that were forming to look back towards Izuku. Pretty much every time I have to fight someone, I always think of the worst possible outcomes, and it terrifies me. A large grin spread over the boy's face as he continued his pep talk. But then I think about how I can help stop that from happening. Well, technically that's not true. Before I even know if I can help, the idea of helping just pops through my head and before I know it, I'm already moving to help. But before that moment, I'm hesitating, thinking, what's going to go wrong? As his words sank in, Kyoka moved to sit next to her boyfriend and take a moment to process. After a small, comfortable silence, she spoke up. Hey, Izuku? As he turned his head to look at her, Kyoka gave the boy a small kiss, thank you. Not one to be outdone or waste a romantic moment, Izuku startled Kyoka by pulling her onto his lap before hugging her from behind. Anytime. The couple shared the evening resting under the tree, while watching the setting sun's light cascade across the surface of the lake, casting the world in a comfortable warm hue. By the time Izuku felt it was time to leave, a couple of hours had passed and the two had barely moved. He was about to suggest returning to the house when a realization hit the young farmer. She had never actually asked him about what had happened. Hey Kyo, he said before receiving a small hum of acknowledgement. Aren't you going to ask about what that whole thing was? Well, I am curious, and mostly I just want to know how to stop something like this from happening again. But I felt like if you were comfortable with talking about it, you would bring it up. So, are you? The purple-haired girl responded while trying to crane her head to look at Izuku's face. Before giving up and returning to the comfortable position she was in. Well, I am, but it kind of involves brining up some secrets, and before you say anything, no, I don't have to tell you and I do want to tell you. It's just a really long and weird story. Kyoka let out a low chuckle. Well, we have time and I'm currently cuddling with my boyfriend I started dating after we were both warped across dimensions. So, talk away. Izuku started at the beginning, not from the day he was diagnosed quirkless, but with the dawn of quirks themselves. Two brothers, one born with a quirk above all others, the ability to steal quirks, and the other sickly and powerless. How out of love, pity, a desire for control, or any other unfathomable reason the elder brother gave a quirk to the younger, a simple quirk that stockpiles power. But his brother wasn't quirkless. Unlike the elder, he couldn't take quirks, but he could still give his own away. Seemingly useless, but with the addition of another quirk, the two fused into something greater. A quirk that could store energy and pass it one to another, to carry the torch and build it brighter and brighter. The dual quirk was named One for All, the antithesis of its creator quirk, All for One. Eventually the younger brother opposed cruel actions of the elder and fought against him and his criminal empire. He was killed for his efforts, but not before passing One for All on. His successor fought the elder brother and met a similar fate. It wasn't until the eighth holder, the symbol of peace, All Might fought and won, but not without great cost. The older brother is only known by the name of his quirk, All for One. He was the villain that All Might fought at Kamino. Kyoka let that information sink in for a moment. So, I'm guessing since you know this whole secret story, you weren't really a late bloomer? The soft "no" left Izuku's lips. Kyoka responded after a short moment. Thank you for trusting me with this. For what my opinion's worth, I think All Might made the best choice of his life when he chose you. The words were worth a lot to Izuku, as he held her opinion in high regard. While he never thought Kyoka would look down on him for being quirkless, hearing her words out loud made his heart feel lighter. What happened back in the mines though, well, even though Izuku had just been told his next words were true, even he had a hard time believing the situation would get stranger. As it turns out, One for All was still growing in a way. It's hit some sort of critical mass recently. The quirk doesn't just store and pass on power, but a lot of the previous holders. Their strength, their memories, and even their quirks. This stunned Kyoka silent for a second. So that whole inky black shadow tendrils thing was one of the previous holders' quirks. The fifth one to be specific, Black Whip. I only met Banjo Daigoro, but he says soon I'll meet all of the other holders and get their quirks. Kyoka felt it was a bit ironic, the quirkless boy now in possession of multiple quirk, but she didn't point it out, instead opting to question further. So, how many will you get? And do you know what they will be? Well, including the super strength, I'll have 7. All Might told me his mentor had a floating quirk powered up to allow full flight, but as for the rest, no idea. Daigoro only said that I'll be seeing Nana soon. Kyoka wanted to find out more and ask more and more, to the point she began to think Izuku was rubbing off on her. She pushed those questions to the side, however. Both farmers were feeling worn out and emotionally exhausted after such a day. I've got nearly 100 different things to ask you right now, but I think I'll save it for later. I just want to enjoy the rest of the evening. Do you want to head back to the house now? Nah, Kyoka felt too comfortable in her current position to try and leave it. Not right now. The revelation that her boyfriend was not only born 100% bona fide quirkless, but also chosen by the greatest hero in Japan's history to take his quirk and legacy and would be getting all the quirks of the previous users actually changed very little in Kyoka's day-to-day routine. She still woke up and tended to whatever chores needed to be done. The two farmers still worked to provide whatever assortment of items the little Junimos asked for, why they needed construction materials, smelted metal or gold coins would forever be a mystery, and the couple still hung out with their friends. All that really changed was Izuku's training regimen. While he still did physical training with Alex on the beach, he now dedicated half of his quirk training time to increasing his max percentage of One for All, and the other half to the newly acquired Black Whip. While improvement of One for All was steady, albeit slow, progress on the new quirk was practically null. Black Whip was fueled by anger, and the added power from One for All could make the quirk lash out unpredictably. For the first few days, Izuku couldn't make any progress. It was hard for him to muster up the anger needed to bring the quirk out without pumping too much to keep control. After the third full day of training Black Whip to no results, Izuku was feeling dejected. One for All was a much different beast to tame. Sure, it broke his bones when he first got it, but this new quirk felt like it was fighting him at every step of the way. His mood hadn't improved at all when he returned to the house, something Kyoka easily picked up on. Still nothing? She asked while preparing 2 plates of some recipe Emily had mailed over. Izuku let out a weary sigh and shook his head. It's just frustrating. When I got One for All, it felt like I was starting a decade behind everyone else. I couldn't even use my quirk without hurting myself while the rest of the class was improving every day. And now that I actually have a handle on it, another quirk shows up and it feels like I'm being dragged back to the starting line again. Izuku took a moment to eat while he collected his thoughts, eventually finding the words to explain himself further. I know I should be grateful. There are people who would give up everything for a strong quirk like this. I just hate feeling like you're not enough? Kyoka knew the feeling well. Kids were cruel, as most children with mutation-type quirks could attest. Add in the fact that until she discovered the ability to channel her heartbeat through her earjacks, Kyoka got hit with the weak quirk stigma as well. She knew how much that type of crap could stick with you, and Kyoka would be the first to admit she got off rather easy compared to some of her old middle school classmates. For a boy who spent most of his life being told he should just give up on his dreams, that his existence was a mistake, well, Izuku didn't offer a response, but the look on his face told the purple-haired girl she hit the mark. Luckily, she knew just the cure for the lingering self-doubting thoughts. Besides the pair's nightly ritual of bad movies and cuddling, Izuku was a results-oriented person. While he may be smart enough to realize that mastering a new quirk would take time and effort, actually seeing some results, no matter how minor, was the quickest way to break him out of this funk. Well, you said Black Whip needs anger to work, right? A nod from Izuku prompted her to continue. Well, are you just trying to feel angry, or do you think of anything to get you there? The only thing I can think of that gets me angry enough to use Black Whip is being in a situation like defending Kota from Muscular or stopping Overhaul to protect Eri. Anything else I've tried just doesn't have the kick to get it going, but those life or death moments make Black Whip too uncontrollable. So that was the problem. Izuku wasn't angry enough normally to drag the quirk out, or he got too angry to maintain control. Kyoka and Izuku dined in silence while the girl mused on just how Izuku could hit that perfect sweet spot. Dinner was nearly over, and the two began to wash their used dishes when the girl finally spoke up. Hey Aizu? How was it like growing up? Quirkless, I mean. The Verdunette wasn't expecting such a question. From the day Kyoka found out he was a late bloomer, the exact details of his childhood went unspoken. She knew the hell that growing up quirkless in a quirk-dominated society was. In their first month of UA Class 1A had been presented with a lecture concerning discrimination based on quirk status. During the lesson, the exact statistic of how many quirkless people committed suicide in their lifetimes was given, 40%. Only for the class to erupt when Aizawa revealed it to be one of his logical ruses. In actuality, 40% of the quirkless population committed suicide before they had even finished high school. While the class reacted with horror and disgust that people would drive someone to such lengths simply for the lack of a quirk, Izuku and Bakugo were silent, both trying to look anywhere other than the front of the class. Statistics and graphs are impersonal, however, and Kyoka needed to hear the details from her boyfriend. It was bad. It started out pretty simple. I still orbited around Bakugo and his cronies, even when they started calling me Deku or making me the villain in every game. But pretty soon it got worse. Izuku had stopped washing by this point, with his gaze lost reminiscing on past cruelties. I liked analyzing quirks, even before my diagnosis, and I tried to give everyone advice on how to use theirs or new techniques. Anything to be helpful, prove I wasn't useless. He didn't really like that. Said I was trying to call them stupid for not knowing how their own quirks worked. By this point the dishes sat in the sink forgotten by the both of them, Kyoka too invested to do anything other than listen to what Izuku had to go through. Then one day, a kid in my class asked if I wanted to help him with quirk training. He could grow spikes from his hands. I was so excited that someone actually wanted my help. I didn't notice that he was leading me to the back of the school, to a blind spot where there weren't any security cameras. Izuku began to trace his thumb over a spot on his arm. The potion from the wizard healed every bit of scarring on his body, but sometimes Izuku could still feel them. From then on, I was the official test dummy for anyone to practice using their quirk on. Any teacher that saw what was happening ignored it. But honestly, that wasn't really the worst part. It gets worse. Kyoka didn't know if she wanted to know what could be worse than constant abuse like that. Well, physically that's the worst it got. Kaken actually put a stop to it one day, said that they shouldn't waste their time on some worthless Deku, but from the glare he was giving them I could tell he was set off. A small smile graced itself on Izuku's face, before it just as quickly disappeared. The worst thing was the pity. It stated small, the teachers telling me to be careful playing with the other kids. Wouldn't want someone with my condition to get hurt after all. But it just never stopped. Every single person in my life treated me like I would break if they looked at me wrong. A groan of metal snapped Izuku out of memory lane, as he realized he had begun to grip the lip of the sink hard enough to leave imprints of his fingers. I don't really want to talk about it anymore, if that's all right. Yeah, I get it. Clearly the topic was a sensitive one, no point in trying to force a conversation over it. But on the bright side, I think I may have an idea for getting control of your new quirk. Izuku pet his head, wondering how the conversation they just had could help. I'd say from your handiwork on the sink, all that bullshit you went through makes you pretty angry. Kyoka pointed an ear jack to the new dents. Have you tried using that to bring out Black Whip? No, not really. Thinking back to those days just hurts, so I try not to. By now the dishes had been left to soak, completely abandoned, as Kyoka dragged Izuku to sit on the sofa. You know that's not healthy, right? The purple-haired girl responded in concern. Izuku left her without an answer long enough that she decided to speak up again. I'm not saying you need to tell me your life story in graphic detail right now, but anytime you just want to talk about that stuff I'll listen. While his face didn't notably change, Kyoka could have sworn Izuku's eyes brightened up, even if just a bit. Thanks, Kyoka, for putting up with my sheet. I know it's probably a lot to... Hey! Kyoka stuck a jack to the boy's neck in what could be seen as a threatening manner, but Izuku knew better. If she wanted to hurt him, he would already be convulsing on the floor from the vibration. I'm not putting up with anything. You would literally move a mountain if I asked you to. This is the least I could do. Plus, I like seeing you happy. As she pulled the jack away from her boyfriend's neck, she felt a smirk creep onto her face. Also, what's with the swearing? She asked sarcastically. The boy I started dating would have fainted the second he heard the word F-. Well, I have been living with you for the better part of 2 months. As the two shared a laugh and enjoyed their evening together, Izuku silently thanked whatever cosmic forces governed his life had allowed Kyoka to enter it. The next day during his training, Izuku began to test out Kyoka's suggestion. It was difficult to even think back on the discrimination and abuse without falling down a cycle of self-pity and doubt, but after a few hours of failed attempts he had finally managed to move a large stone from one end of the quarry to the other without breaking it. It didn't make him feel as good as the day he received one for all, standing atop the last scrap from Takoba Beach as he screamed in victory. But it felt close. Kyoka! It's so good to see you! The cheerful voice of Emily rang out the second the girl in question stepped into the household. It seemed like every time anyone entered a building the Bluenet was currently in, she somehow knew and was ready with a greeting no matter what she was doing or where she was. You say that every time you see me. Kyoka responded, passing by Emily's craft area to see the girl focused on whatever creative endeavor had her focus for the week. While the girl was a skilled tailor, Emily often branched out and dabbled with a variety of passions. Because it's always true. Emily had a painter's smock on top of her outfit, and in front of her was a half-filled canvas. It seemed to be of some kind of whale, but in the sky? And for some reason a potted plant was there. Attributing such a scene to Emily just being Emily, Kyoka placed the basket she was carrying down next to a sewing machine. The sheep are old enough to be sheared now, so I brought you some wool. Emily had asked for some if the two farmers ever started to raise sheep, offering to use any excess fabric she made for new clothes. Taking care to clean her hands of any paint and removing the stained smock, Emily moved to inspect the gift. Thank you so much, I hope it wasn't too much trouble. Before Kyoka could get a word out that it wasn't, Emily had already scooped up the basket and started to rummage through various papers with clothing designs. After dumping out the wool and handing the basket back, she suddenly stopped and let out an excited gasp. I just had a great idea. Due to previous exposure with the likes of Ishido and Kaminari, Kyoka was close to letting loose some form of snarky comment. Through a Herculean force of will, the punk girl held her tongue and instead asked, "What is it?" Truly a moment of pure heroism. The Stardew Valley Fair is in less than 3 weeks. Normally I don't display anything like Pierre or Marnie because I don't sell my works, but I was thinking I could make some specialty fabric or even some clothes for you to display. Because it's still made from a product of your farm, you can use it for your Grange display. The idea sounded solid to Kyoka. Emily's tailoring was very high quality and would be a great addition to any display her and Izuku set up, and Emily got, what did she get from this? Looking to promote your work? Izuku and I would be happy to help any way we can. Everyone in Pelican Town had been good to the two farmers, but Emily always seemed to go plus ultra with her generosity, and neither Kyoka nor Izuku were the type of people to let it go unreciprocated. Emily waved away such concerns, however. "Oh no, I'm still not selling anything. I don't really care if you tell people who made it or not, I just want to show that good clothes can be made locally. Getting clothes shipped to your door is becoming popular, and while it is convenient, a lot of small businesses can't compete with larger retailers." Kyoka and Emily spent the next half hour discussing the collaboration, mainly deciding what clothing would be best to display in the fair. While normally she would ask Izuku's opinion in a matter that would affect them both like this, Kyoka had seen what clothes he chose to wear back in Japan. A collection of t-shirts that had said things like t-shirt or dress shirt was likely not what Emily had in mind when offering to display her work. Pretty soon the sky had begun to darken, and Kyoka took that as her cue to leave while Emily started some design sketches for her new project. Just as she was about to exit, Kyoka was nearly hit by the door as Haley threw it open, slammed it closed behind her, and stormed past the farmer with a loud, "Out of my way," before retreating to her room. Kyoka had few interactions with Haley. The blonde came off as one of the stereotypical, preppy girls that the Violet wasn't fond of. The few conversations they shared had done little to change this impression, as Haley was either disinterested or accidentally condescending, but this level of borderline hostility was new. The surprise on Kyoka's face must have been apparent, as Emily was quick to explain. "I'm sorry about how Haley just acted, she's been in a bad mood for a few days now." "Bad mood is putting it lightly." Kyoka scoffed. "What's so wrong that she's taking it out on everyone else?" To see Emily without anything other than a bright smile was unusual, but the small frown on her face was a rarity. She lost a bracelet on the beach. Normally she would just buy another, but this one was passed down to our great-grandmother by her grandmother, and then to Haley. Emily turned to grab something from her craft room and came back with a small blue gemstone and a sketch of a golden bracelet. I knew how much it meant to her, so I thought I would make her one just like it, even if it wasn't the same one. A dejected sigh, another rarity from Emily, escaped her lips. She started yelling that I was just trying to make her stop complaining, and since then she's been, "Well, you saw." Well, that was certainly different than what Kyoka was expecting, but something still didn't feel right. Sure, Haley liked nice jewelry and would be mad about losing a nice piece, but why would she be so adamant against replacing it with a new one? This is about more than just the bracelet, isn't it? Kyoka liked to think she was good at reading in between the lines enough to realize what was going on, but you know what they say about assuming. "Yeah, it is." Emily made her way to sofa to sit down, and Kyoka followed her lead. "Our parents like to travel a lot, and I guess either didn't expect to have kids or just didn't want to change their lifestyle. They still send money and letters asking how we're doing and what's going on, but for the past 2 years they haven't really been around. Even before then we lived with our great-grandmother here in Pelican Town more often than our own parents." Kyoka could relate to the feeling even if only slightly. Her parents always made time for her, but their lives as musicians meant that there would occasionally be stretches of time where she would stay with family friends. Only in the past few years did the pair decide Kyoka was old enough to come along, but even then, it was far from any sort of vacation, as the effort they put into their concerts left little time for shared activities. Haley used to really like it here, always finding new things for her photography. A little while before our parents left to travel, our great-grandmother passed, and Haley started to lash out, kind of similar to how she is now. I guess losing the bracelet Grandma gave her is dragging up some bad memories. "I'm sorry to hear that." Kyoka didn't have anything else to say in the face of such a story. "I hope Haley starts feeling better soon." "Thank you for the concern. I know Haley and she'll bounce back from this. Even if she doesn't show it, I know she would appreciate the concern." With no more to talk about and the evening fast approaching, Kyoka left the household and made her way to the nearby bench in front of the saloon. She first wrote off Haley's mood as just some bratty tantrum, but now with the full story she felt like a beach for assuming as such. Practically anyone would lash out after losing something with that much sentimental value, and even if well-meaning, Emily's attempts to replace it could easily be seen in the wrong light. But what could she do about it? She can't just offer some bog-standard platitudes, and clearly replacement wasn't an option. It's not like Kyoka could just turn an entire beach over to find a single bracelet that might not be there anymore. Right? Kyoka took a look at the time. Izuku would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone by using Black Whip to try and catch some fish in the evening, both to practice catching something small and fast without crushing it, and to catch a few fish that only came out late in the day to finish a bundle for the Junimos. Again, she didn't know why they needed fish at all. She had a few hours to kill, and Izuku was always saying it was a hero's job to help even when no one asked them to. After making up her mind and leaping off the bench to her feet, Kyoka marched herself down to the beach. She had a bracelet to find. Most festival days had Izuku and Kyoka waking up and starting their day with a small sense of urgency. The events so far began fairly early in the day, and the two could not afford to take it slow if they wished to arrive when the festivities opened. Or more accurately, Izuku said they should hurry while Kyoka was fine being an hour or 2 late. Unlike most festival days, there was no urgency in the farmers, as today was the dance of the moonlight jellies, the last day of summer, and the festival would be held on the beach from 10 p.m. to midnight. After placing the last of the harvest to be shipped out, feeding the animals, and clearing out the fields to be ready for new crops, the pair was left with little to do. Pierre wouldn't sell seeds for the fall season until tomorrow, for some reason, and beyond preparing some more fertilizer there was nothing more to do on the farm. Izuku was unused to such a large amount of free time with nothing to occupy it. Even before his admittance into any time to himself was dedicated to mostly to hero analysis or learning how to do tasks around the house to better help his mother. Even after the move into the dorms, he often found himself training or studying. Kyoka thought it was pretty funny, and a bit depressing, that she had to teach the boy how to do something with his time other than training, but was up to the challenge, nevertheless. After a lot of new albums, a good movie and its terrible sequel, some junk food, and 8 hours later, the two found themselves walking to the beach eager to see the natural phenomenon. Izuku had done his own research into the event, curious about the migrating jellyfish. Although the exact reason was still unknown, the jellyfish were attracted to lights. Every year on the last day of summer, the residents of Pelican Town would place paper lanterns to attract the jellyfish as they migrated to warmer waters for the fall and winter, which would cause the ocean to softly glow from the bioluminescence. As the pair arrived at the beach, they saw most of the town had already arrived. Kyoka waved to Emily and Haley, the latter of the two wearing an old, worn bracelet, while Izuku talked with Demetrius, the only town member more excited for the event than Izuku, about migration patterns, average swarm sizes, and other nerd stuff, to quote Kyoka. As Lewis sent out a boat with a lantern meant to attract the traveling swarm of jellyfish, Izuku and Kyoka found a section of the pier secluded enough for their tastes to watch the event together. For a while, the two feared that something was amiss. It had been almost 15 minutes with nothing but the soft glow of the paper lanterns and the sound of waves hitting the shore, but none of the villagers seemed concerned. Soon enough, Izuku thought he could barely make out a soft glow in the water. He was about to point it out to Kyoka when an excited cry from Jazz called the town's focus to the jellyfish. For as long as it took the jellyfish to first arrive, the rest weren't far behind, and soon the waters surrounding the pier were bathed in a soft, cyan glow. While Jazz and Vincent were admiring some baby jellyfish and Demetrius was jotting down notes on the swarm, Izuku and Kyoka sat by the sidelines, content to admire the natural wonder before them. "It's so beautiful." Izuku found the words escaping from his lips. A quiet hum from Kyoka signaled that she agreed. "Hard to believe it's been 2 months," the girl said. With the close proximity, Kyoka practically felt Izuku tense up. It was subtle, anyone watching probably wouldn't be able to tell, but she knew Izuku was stressing out about something. Why, 2 months, was the only thing he managed to get out before his own words failed him. After a PRD of silence, Izuku managed to force out a question he had been dreading to ask for a while. "Kyo, do you think we'll actually be going back to Japan?" The words felt like sandpaper leaving his throat. He had done everything in his power to remain optimistic about their situation. How any day now, the two would find themselves back home, surrounded by worried classmates and their absence remembered only as a strange story to tell the press during interviews. But it had been 2 months. Izuku knew quirks, and he had never heard of one with a temporary effect lasting more than a week. I don't know. Kyoka's voice was subdued. I want to say we will, but... Her voice trailed off, leaving her thought unfinished, but Izuku didn't need her to say it out loud to know what she was thinking. I think we need to start treating all this as a permanent thing. Izuku said. It hurt to say it out loud, to say that the pair would never see their homes again, but both knew it had to be done. There was a fine line between optimism and delusion, and denying the reality of the situation would just be harmful in the long run. Slowly the jellyfish left, one by one, to continue their migration. As the last glow faded into the ocean, and the town members left to return home, Kyoka grasped Izuku's hand. I'm just glad I met you. I mean, being the #1 hero duo sounds nice, but if this whole farming ice guy had to happen to be with you, then I don't mind. Izuku let out a small laugh, the dull ache in his chest already dissipating with her words. Yeah, he said, before leaning in to plant a small kiss on her lips. Me neither. The fall month brought a lot of changes for the pair of farmers. Obviously, with a new season came new crops that needed planting, and the work that entailed. Every day came with it a new task that demanded attention, from expanding the fields and crafting enough fertilizer to compensate, to setting up fences around said fields as well as new pens for the farm animals. The coop had recently been expanded to hold ducks and, oddly enough, dinosaurs. Izuku didn't know if having a literal prehistoric reptile loose on the farm would be bad for the crops, but he wasn't going to take chances and find out. Winter was also on the horizon, just one short month away, and bringing with it a whole host of necessary preparations. Add in the upcoming fair, with dedicated displays for the crowds coming to see what the town could produce, and the two farmers could barely find time for themselves. Luckily, a few days before the fair a rainstorm came in. With all the fences set up and the watering done for them, Izuku and Kyoka had free time that the two immediately used to do more work. Kyoka decided to go to the mines, hoping to find a valuable gemstone for the centerpiece of their fair display, while Izuku went down to the pier to spend some time fishing, both to hopefully catch some of the few remaining fish that the Junimos were requesting, as well as make some extra money to set aside for winter. Izuku sat with his feet dangling off the pier while the rain pelted down on him. A sou'wester hat that Izuku bought from a sentient mouse, which is a sentence that he never thought would ever be uttered, kept the rain off his face and his vision clear, while a thick coat made by Emily kept the worst of the weather off him. Not like it mattered that much. Izuku had never minded the rain before, and his training on Takoba Beach with Toshinori would take place no matter the weather, so he was well accustomed. The door to Willie's shop opened from behind Izuku, and the fisherman walked out with a pole in hand before casting his line out into the water, standing just far enough away to not get the fishing lines crossed. Izuku gave him a nod of acknowledgement before turning back to his own pole. As one of the people who helped himself and Kyoka when the two washed up on the beach, Izuku held a great deal of respect for the man. Even though he could make his own lures and bait for cheaper, the Verdinets still bought from Willis' shop to help support him, as not many in the town were that interested in fishing. As the sun was beginning to set and the overcast skies slowly grew darker, Izuku was close to packing up for the day when Willie broke the silence between them. The fair's coming up in a few days. You two got your Grange display sorted out? The man said while reeling in a red snapper. I know what's going in mine, he said in a mirthful tone. For the most part, Izuku said with a small shrug. Just kind of nervous, I guess. It's our first time doing something like this. Don't worry so much about it. Lewis likes to make a whole spectacle with the displays, giving them scores and prizes, but as long as you're proud of what you're showing, that's all that matters. Willie recast his line before letting out a laugh. Course I might be saying that because I've never placed higher than third in those things. I get the feeling Lewis doesn't like the smell of fresh fish. The two kept up the small talk for a little while longer, but eventually Izuku took his leave and made his way back home, all the while thinking on the fisherman's advice. The notion of some form of competition sent him scrambling to put in as much effort as he could in order to make a good impression, but was it really necessary? Sure, he would like to win, but this wasn't the sports festival. Even if he and Kyoka were new to farming, Izuku liked to think they had made great progress, and some ranking in a local fair wouldn't change how far the two had come since washing up on the beach. Regardless of what anyone else thought, he could be proud of that. This is a lot more people than I was expecting. Kyoka found herself agreeing with Izuku. The past festivals had been more akin to small gatherings due to the size of the town. The farmers knew the fair would be different as it was open to the public, but both of them had underestimated just how many people would be in attendance. How many people would take time out of their day just to come to some small farming town? As it turns out, quite a lot. The small stone paths that made up Pelican. Town streets went nearly unseen as people pushed and shoved to get to the next game, shop, or display. Gus was in his element, grilling and serving burgers almost as fast as the crowd could eat them, while several other villagers ran stalls to sell their work or show off their talents. Clint had a rare smile on his face as several members of various adventuring guilds admired his work, while Leah and Haley had small sections to show off their sculptures and photography respectively. Several vendors that Kyoka guessed were run by people from the surrounding towns had been set up, selling things like fresh produce and fertilizer to wine and baked goods. Even the sentient hat-selling mouse, Hat Mouse, had brought a tiny wooden wagon filled with various pieces of headwear and skirted around the crowd trying to sell his hats. While the size of the crowd was far from something like UA's Culture Festival, neither teen had expected such a turnout to what they thought would be a glorified farmer's market. The pair fought their way through the mass of people to get to the area set aside for the Grange displays. Only 3 other people would be setting up displays this year: Pierre, Marnie, and Willie. While anyone in town could theoretically participate, most of the town either didn't produce something to display or chose to forego the competition to run a stall like Clint and Leah. Is it just me, or is Pierre way too into this competition? Kyoka said so only Izuku could hear, which due to the surrounding crowd was just slightly louder than a normal conversation. True to her word, Pierre had clearly put in a lot of effort into his display. The front of his wooden display stall had custom-made letters spelling his name, and the shop owner was currently making micro-adjustments to the position of his produce, not resting until every single object was exactly where he wanted it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a little competitive. The Verdinette responded. Truth be told, Izuku thought it was a bit much, but this clearly meant a lot to the man, and who was he to criticize that? Kyoka didn't seem to share his thoughts on the matter, however. I mean, there's going plus ultra, but then there's just too much. All you get for winning are some tokens you can spend at like one stall. Deciding it was not a good use of his time to argue against his girlfriend on a point he didn't even disagree with, Izuku instead turned to set up their own display. Emily had arrived the day before with a pair of outfits, only asking for the pair to place a small sign that said both outfits had been made with local resources and labor. The rest of the display was taken up mostly by some animal products and crops, and a few strange purple mushrooms the two found in the mines that Demetrius had told them were fairly valuable. The centerpiece of their display was a rainbow-colored stone called a prismatic shard that Kyoka had found during her time in the mines. Gunther, the curator of the town's museum, informed them of just how rare such a find was, and the two decided to donate the stone only after using it for the display. After organizing the stall in a way he guessed would be aesthetically pleasing, Izuku took a moment to look at what Marnie and Willie brought. Marnie's display was filled with animal products, as expected of a rancher, with eggs, bundles of cloth, and jugs of milk surrounding an oversized cheese wheel, while Willie had several boxes of specialty bait and lures as well as several large fish, including the red snapper Izuku had seen him catch before. Neither of the two seemed to be as concerned with winning the little competition as Pierre, but both were clearly proud to show the results of their efforts. Well, it looks like you two have had a productive year. Louis' voice called out from behind the pair. The mayor took a moment to look over the 4 displays, cringing for a moment as the fragrance from Willie's stall hit his nose, before turning back to the farmers. I must say, I didn't expect such a showing for your first fair, but I guess many hands make for light work. I'm sure old Gregory is resting well with you two running the farm. The pair basked in the unexpected praise for a moment, before Izuku spoke up. Well, what happens now? How long does it take to judge the displays? It doesn't take long at all, but as for now I'd say you two have earned a break, so just enjoy the fair. Kyoka started to voice her concerns over leaving the display unattended, especially with a valuable gemstone front and center, but Louis assuaged her concerns. We haven't had a problem with someone trying to steal from the displays for quite a while, and I always stay close to make sure no one tries. Plus, I got Marlin ready to help out if someone causes trouble. Lewis motioned to the head of the local adventurers guild, Marlin. The man had long since gone gray and was sporting an eye patch, but Izuku and Kyoka knew the man was dangerous enough that they felt sorry for anyone that tried to steal with him around. With their fears of theft dissuaded, the couple toured the fairgrounds. By now a portion of the crowd was moving to the dining area near the fountain to get an early lunch, so the two had a much easier time of moving through the crowd. Leah was busy working on a wooden sculpture, and Maru was demonstrating new inventions to passerby, but the largest group of onlookers was forming around Haley's attraction, where she had displayed various photographs she had taken over the years, starting from her first picture to the present. Neither teen knew that much about photography, but the improvement in Haley's skill was obvious to see. Emily was helping her sister with her stall, but this mainly boiled down to offering homemade snacks and gossiping about her and Haley's childhoods. After visiting their friends, Kyoka and Izuku spent some time playing the overpriced fair games. The prizes all being star tokens to turn in at a vendor did prevent Izuku from getting his girlfriend a large stuffed animal after a display of skill, as is tradition. Seeing the man running the strength tester falter with his strongman persona after Izuku launched the puck so hard it nearly took the bell off was a good substitute, however. I didn't take you for a show-off green. Using your quirk to just impress your date at a fair? How daring! The Violet said with a smirk. I mean, who can blame me for wanting to impress a girl as great as you dork? But I didn't use my quirk though. Izuku corrected. Oh, color me impressed then, the information was surprising even to her. He's a lot stronger without his quirk than I gave him credit for. While Kyoka had seen his body before, seeing Izuku's strength in such a display gave her some scandalous thoughts of her boyfriend's physique. That's hot. The crowd around Gus had thinned while the pair enjoyed the festivities, so the two took the chance to grab some lunch. All the food on offer was complimentary for the event, so nothing was stopping either teen from eating their fill. Kyoka had just finished her second burger when Izuku went in for a sixth, his appetite a consequence of the heightened protein intake needed to fuel his quirk-enhanced muscles. Kyoka took it upon herself to stop Izuku from becoming a one-man cheeseburger apocalypse and dragged him off to see the various shops set up near the river. Most of the vendors didn't have anything that interested either farmer, no point in buying fresh produce when it's your job to grow it after all, but there were a few knickknacks that caught their attention. Kyoka bought a small, hand-carved rabbit for Izuku, explaining that his first costume always looked like a green bunny and the image was hard to separate from him, while Izuku bought the girl some new guitar picks. Izuku was busy purchasing some jerky made out of animals Kyoka didn't even know could be made into jerky when something caught her eye. Rasmodius, already an odd sight due to his rare attendance to town events, was having a conversation with a woman who looked like a stereotypical fortune teller, crystal ball included. After following his girlfriend's gaze to the tent and noticing the wizard, Izuku chimed in, "Do you think they know each other?" The boy wanted to thank the man once more for healing his arm, but the wizard had apparently finished whatever business he had and quickly left in the direction of his tower. I think so. I couldn't hear them over the noise, but the conversation seemed friendly. Well, do you want to ask? Besides, if she can actually tell the future, it might be interesting to learn. The notion of magic had intrigued Izuku, but as it turns out such forces being confirmed to exist didn't reduce the number of fake psychics and similar scammers, but actually did the opposite. After completing a job for the wizard from the town's notice board, Rasmodius advised the two to be cautious, as there are many people who fake such talents for profit. Nah, even if she can tell the future, I'd rather let it be a surprise. After visiting most of the attractions the fair had to offer, Kyoka and Izuku decided to return to the display area and see how they placed. Both had low expectations as it was their first year at the farm, but were pleasantly surprised to see a large first-place ribbon on the front of the stall. The two collected their prize, 1,000 tokens, all while blushing from the praise of their neighbors. Even Pierre stopped by to congratulate them, but not before offering a challenge to see who wins next year, something both teens found oddly familiar. Why is it no matter what we do, people are throwing out declarations of war? Izuku said while he thought of the days before the sports festival. Kyoka could only offer a shrug in response. It actually felt nice being the target of such a challenge for once, as all the previous challenges at UA had been levied at Class 1A as a whole or Midoriya specifically. Not that she would say such a thing out loud. The last stop for the two was the prize booth placed just before the path to the bus stop, and beyond it their farm. Kyoka had a lucky streak at the gambling game, which was literally just picking between two colors for a wheel to land on, and combined with their prize tokens, they had just enough for a scarecrow that reminded Izuku of an old pre-quirk movie character, and something called a star drop. The man who ran the stall said it was a mysterious fruit that helped draw out latent energy in whoever consumes it, and that the taste was unique to each person. Such a mysterious and valuable fruit being sold at a fair's prize table made the two farmers doubtful of the claims, but with none of the other offerings standing out, the pair decided to split it. All doubts faded away the moment the fruit passed their lips. As Izuku swallowed, the taste of the star drop filled his mind with memories of eating his mother's katsudon. Both parents on either side of him before his father left them because he was born wrong went to work overseas. Right before the taste and memories faded from his mind, the scene shifted. His childhood apartment morphed into the farmhouse, and instead of his parents, Izuku was dining with Kyoka and a small green-haired child with earphone jacks. Kyoka's mind was taken to family music nights, and the joy she felt learning how to play whatever instrument caught her attention. Like with Izuku, the scene changed near the end. Now she and Izuku were the ones cheering on a purple-haired child with diamond-patterned freckles happily strumming away on a guitar. A taste that brought up vivid memories and more was not the only oddity of the star drop, however. It was subtle, possibly a consequence of splitting the fruit in half, but both farmers felt better. Not only did both of them feel like they had gotten the best rest of their lives, but Kyoka could swear the crowd of the fair had just gotten a little bit louder. Izuku had a much more subdued effect. He simply felt like he had a particularly good workout, but without the fatigue and strained muscles. If he could hear the vestiges of One for All, however, Izuku would have instantly learned that the star drop not only affected his body but his quirk as well. The past wielders, being a part of the quirk, had all felt the jolt of power after consuming the fruit. It wasn't that much of one. The ninth One for All user wouldn't be throwing out 100% smashes anytime soon, but the fruit didn't just make the boy able to handle more power, it strengthened the quirk itself. Alright, the first holder said to his successors, the next person to talk to 9, tell him to find more of those things. All agreed. A chorus of affirmations rang out in the dark mindscape that made up One for All, while Izuku and Kyoka walked back to the farm for a quiet evening together. The bus stop near the farm was bustling with activity, as nearly half the town was waiting to board the bus headed for Zuzu City. After almost 3 months of practicing, Sam, Sebastian, and Abigail felt ready enough to hold their first performance. It was far from glamorous. The venue was little more than a rundown park near an old apartment complex, but a gig was a gig. Kyoka, Izuku, glad you could make it. Abigail called out to the pair when she saw them arrive. Sam had visited the two a few days before to inform them of the concert and offer tickets. While neither farmer would be performing on stage, the trio treated both Kyoka and Izuku as honorary members for helping the band find its style. Wouldn't miss it, the Violet said as she neared the bus. Besides, we live literally a stone's throw away. We could hear you guys from the front door. She continued while pointing a jack to the roof of the farmhouse, still visible over the tree line. Sebastian, now done checking over the packed instruments, chimed in. I'm just glad the town's bus got repaired. Renting a different one would be too expensive, and I don't think all the gear would fit on my motorcycle. The bus behind Sebastian, which once sat rusted over and abandoned, was now practically shining and ready to go. By this point, Kyoka and Izuku had stopped questioning exactly how a group of tiny forest spirits knew how to repair infrastructure and large vehicles, instead simply taking such happenings in stride. Well, I think everyone that said they were coming is here, Sam said while looking over the gathered crowd. Most of the younger residents had come to support the band, as well as Sam's mother Jody and his younger brother Vincent. The rest of the town simply couldn't make the time to attend, busy with work or other obligations, but still offered their support nonetheless. After loading everyone onto the bus, the trip to Zuzu City passed by rather quickly, with the occupants mostly engaging in small talk or focusing on personal hobbies. As the bus pulled into the city and the town members piled out, Izuku and Kyoka took a look around the new surroundings. The city was reminiscent of places like New York or Chicago, at least judging by the pictures the two had seen. The concert wouldn't be held for another hour. Even though the venue was small, there was still a myriad of tests and checks to make sure all the audio equipment was working properly, so that left the two farmers with some time to kill. "So, where do you want to go first?" Izuku's question was interrupted as Kyoka grabbed hold of his hand and dragged him to the first music store she saw. With the bus rendered inoperable until a few days ago, the punk girl never had the opportunity to browse a music store in person since the day she had washed ashore in Pelican Town, and Kyoka wasn't about to waste this opportunity. "First things first, I'm getting a new guitar. I refuse to keep playing that beat-up spare Sam keeps around. An acoustic would be nice, but if I can find some amps and electric would be good too." Izuku decided to indulge her, only deciding to step in if she came close to buying out an entire music store. He was just, for once in his life, glad he couldn't buy any hero merchandise, as the combined cost of their purchases and lack of self-control might legitimately run the risk of bankrupting the pair. "Plus, I need to find something for you as well. You're pretty good at the guitar already, but even if he's not here, my dad would freak if I ever married a guy who couldn't play at least 2 instruments. "Wait, what?" "And nothing." The now blushing girl quickly tried to cover up her slip of the tongue. Izuku let the matter go, too embarrassed to push it further. Even if the two were a lot more comfortable showing their relationship publicly, the prospect of marriage was still a bit much for two 16-year-olds. "Why don't we check out that music store?" Izuku attempted to distract from the awkward moment. "Then we can get something to eat before the concert." After making their purchases, an acoustic guitar and an electric keyboard, and arranging them to be shipped to the farmhouse, the couple searched for a place to eat. To Izuku's dismay, he was unable to find a spot that served anything even remotely close to Katsudon, and the two settled on a small hole-in-the-wall pizza place near the concert venue. By the time the pair had arrived at the concert grounds, it was almost time for the band to perform. All of the town members had arrived by this point, and a few people were left trickling in to hear the new band. Sam stepped in front of the microphone to address the small but passionate audience. Hello Zuzu City." The cheers he received eroded the nervousness Sam felt, and after a quick glance to his bandmates, he spoke out to the excited crowd once more. "We're from Pelican Town, and this is our first gig. So, I hope you all enjoy the debut of our band, Deep Dope." The trio started to play their first song. Izuku turned to inspect his girlfriend's face, but Kyoka seemed adamant in avoiding his gaze. "Really, Kyo?" he asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, knowing full well what he was talking about. "So, 3 of our friends formed a band and just so happened to name themselves after your favorite band, despite having no way to even know of them?" Kyoka finally turned to face him. "Hey, I didn't make them choose anything, I just threw out the name and they liked it," she confessed before turning the tables on her boyfriend. "And besides, I know if you could be a hero here, then you would name yourself after All Might. No one is as much of a fanboy as you are." Izuku tried to form a rebuttal but was cut off by Kyoka pointing an earphone jack inches from his face. "Don't even try to lie about it, we both know you would." Izuku chuckled a bit to himself while rubbing the back of his head. "I mean, you're probably right." The concert went well, and the Neo Deep Dope had the audience cheering and dancing for nearly the entirety of their set. After selling out of demo tapes, the band packed up and head back to the bus to find all the town members who came out in support waiting to congratulate them for a successful concert. After a ride back to town, Jody forced every member of the band into a group photo to commemorate her little rock star having his big debut. As Kyoka and Izuku looked on at the scene, the rocker girl was just thankful she could help her new friends to pursue their passion. The fact that she may soon be able to buy Deep Dope merchandise again was just a bonus. The winter was becoming one of Izuku's favorite months. Back in Mizudafu, infrastructure needed to be kept free of obstruction, and the city had several people with suitable quirks ready to clear away any snowfall at a moment's notice. Izuku's quirkless background kept him isolated for most of his childhood as well, so the last time he could remember participating in an activity like snowball fights or sledding was before his diagnosis, well more than a decade ago. With the weather preventing crop growth, the two farmers found themselves in a much more flexible position. They would still go spelunking into the mines or catch fish, but it's not like the lakes or caverns would be going anywhere, so the two could afford to work at their own pace. Such as Kyoka finding out that Izuku had not had a proper snow day in over a decade and deciding to put all their plans on hold to rectify such a travesty. They were not the only ones with such an idea, as when the two entered the forest, Kyoka immediately heard distant shouts and childish squeals. Venturing further into the woods, the farmers found Jazz and Vincent pelting each other with snowballs while Sam and Penny were busy making more ammunition for the children. Off to the side, safely out of conflict, Abigail and Sebastian worked together on creating a malformed snowman that reminded Izuku more of the earth beasts made by Pixie Bob than anything remotely humanoid. Vincent was the first to spot the farmers. "Hi Izuku." "Hi Kyoka." The boy called out before being pelted in the back of the head by Jazz while he was distracted. While Vincent returned his focus on the game, Izuku and Kyoka walked up to the other couple to inspect their handiwork. "Hey guys, enjoying the weather?" Abigail asked after adding the fifth rock eye to her creation. "Yep, but it's a special occasion today." A curious tilt from Abigail's head prompted Kyoka to continue. "Izuku here has never been in a snowball fight." Abigail let out a mock gasp of surprise. "Seriously, that's just unacceptable. Even Seb's been in a snowball fight before." "Hey! What's that supposed to mean?" Both boys called out in unison, gaining the attention of the other four. It was quickly decided that such a thing would not stand. "All right," said Izuku, "are we forming teams? Or is it just one big?" Izuku was interrupted as the 5 present young adults hit him with snowballs before fleeing into the forest, each in a different direction. After a brief moment of confusion, Jazz and Vincent threw a small snowball each, hitting him in the chest before they ran off together as well. "Free for all." He spoke out to no one. An afternoon of skirting around trees and laying snow-filled ambushes ensued. Izuku adjusted rather quickly, treating the game like some form of hero exercise. The two farmers quickly became the focus of the game, as their training under Aizawa meant the two were adept at hiding the noise of their movement, even in snow, and Kyoka's enhanced hearing made any attempts at sneaking up on her useless. What began as a free-for-all slowly became a 6-on-2 match, and despite the disparity in numbers, Izuku and Kyoka were not only holding their own, but largely winning. Their victory was short-lived however, as Izuku threw a snowball that hit Sam in the forehead, and he fell to the ground. Izuku almost turned his focus away when he realized the blonde wasn't getting up. Fearing the worst, streaks of green lightning flared behind him as Izuku rushed to the fallen boy. Right into a trap. Sam's eyes snapped open as he sandwiched Izuku's head between 2 handfuls of snow, while Penny came up from behind and dumped an armful down the back of his shirt. Confused, disorientated, and very, very cold, Izuku didn't notice as Abigail, Sebastian, Vincent, Jazz, and even Kyoka emerged from the tree line to assault the verdinette. As Izuku lied on the ground, utterly defeated, Kyoka sauntered up to the snow-caked farmer. "You doin' all right there, Mop Top?" she asked, before seeing that the joint assault had left his once green hair entirely covered in snow. "Or maybe it should be Snow Top now?" Izuku let out a soft, muffled groan before being helped up by the Violet. "That was terrible," he said while shaking his hair free of any remaining frozen particulate. "What the icy beatdown you just got, or the joke?" Kyoka asked. "Yes." With all the fight taken out of the young farmer, Izuku and Kyoka decided to head back to the farmhouse and warm up. After all, what snow day was complete without an evening filled with hot drinks and shared company? Izuku was much more familiar with this side of the winter months than Kyoka. Without a reason to go out and enjoy the snow, the Midoriyas had a small tradition of making hot chocolate and baking cookies on their days off. While the Jiro spent time together, Kyoka's parents possessed culinary talents that could be called decent at best, and instead filled their cold winter nights together with music and takeout. After a simple dinner together, Izuku started to teach Kyoka some of his mother's baking recipes to keep the family tradition going, while Kyoka went to put on one of her new albums she bought from Zuzu City. Just as the pair were about to place the portioned-out dough into the oven, the two heard a knock on the door. Izuku opened the door to find a distressed-looking Marnie. "Hello Izuku, Kyoka." The woman looked into the house and saw the used bowls and baking trays. "Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting your evening." "It's not a problem," Izuku reassured her. "Did you need anything?" Marnie nervously fiddled with her hands while speaking. "I just came over to ask if either of you had seen Shane. I haven't heard from him after his shift at the Jojimart." "Neither of us have seen Shane at all." Kyoka spoke over Izuku's shoulder. "Doesn't he usually spend some time at the saloon in the evening?" Her question only seemed to make Marnie even more nervous. "I stopped by to ask Gus if he had seen him at all, but he hasn't seen Shane either. Clint said he saw him take the path that leads to our house, but he didn't come home." A small pit started to form in Izuku's stomach. He hoped that this was simply a case of Shane taking some time to enjoy the fresh snow fall after a shift at work, but something told him otherwise. Has Shane been acting off at all? I suppose he's been in a bad mood for a few days. Well, more than usual anyway. But today he did seem out of it. I could barely get him to talk at all during breakfast. By now Marnie had to wipe away small tears that had been forming in the corners of her eyes. "I thought it was nothing to worry about, but now that no one knows where he is." Izuku and Kyoka didn't need her to finish to understand what was implied, and the part of them that were still heroes kicked in. While Kyoka shut off the oven to avoid burning down the house and grabbing their winter gear, Izuku was busy calming Marnie. "Kyoka and I will look for Shane," the rancher tried to interject, but the young hero kept talking. "We can search the forest quickly, and right now I think it's best for you and Jazz to be there for each other. We'll find him, Marnie, I promise." The sudden shift in Izuku's demeanor left Marnie stunned for a moment, only able to nod in agreement to Izuku's plan before making her way back to her property. Never before had Aizawa's lectures on not wasting time when changing seemed so important, and the pair had slipped into their winter gear in record time. The two quickly split off after reaching the south end of the farm leading into the forest. Kyoka headed deep into the woods to hopefully pick something up with her quirk, while Izuku pumped as much percentage into full cowling as he could and raced off to the far end of the forest. If Shane planned to do something drastic, the most likely spot would be the cliff face at the southmost end of the forest. As Izuku burst through the tree line, he was relieved to find what looked like Shane, but the fact he was lying face down in the snow and surrounded by empty beer cans did not paint a pretty picture. "Shane? Can you hear me?" Izuku asked the prone man while the lightning faded from his body. The question got a response from the drunken man, mostly incoherent grumbling, until he briefly lifted his face to look towards Izuku. "Hey Izuku. Why were you out late?" Izuku walked up to sit down next to Shane, placing his feet over the ledge. "Me and Kyoka were out looking for you. A lot of people got worried when you didn't come home." "Sorry you two got caught up in us," Shane slurred out. "I don't know why I'm even here." "You mean the cliffside? I'm pretty sure you got drunk and—" "No." Shane cut the verdinet off. "Why I'm even still alive. All I do is work, sleep, and drink just to get through the day. Who should I even bother? I should just roll off this cliff." Izuku grabbed hold of Shane's arm, just in case he tried to go through with anything. "Shane, you're not in a healthy state of mind right now, and doing something drastic like that is never a good solution. Come on, let's get you home and tomorrow we'll—" Shane attempted to throw off the boy's hand with all the force he could muster, which given his state wasn't that much. "Do you know? You're just a kid, you still got hope. I'm just some useless fucking waste of space." The sudden outburst left Izuku in a conundrum. Nothing was stopping him from just picking up Shane and bringing him back to Marnie. In fact, that was probably what he should do. But just leaving the man like this felt wrong. When Izuku was growing up, he wanted to be a hero that made people feel better just by being around. Even in a world that didn't have or need heroes, Izuku couldn't just leave a situation alone if he could do something to help, even if it was just slightly. Before Kyoka and I moved here, the people I grew up with, well, they weren't kind. It seemed like everyone hated me, Told me I was just some worthless freak, useless? That musta isigiri. Izuku let out a small laugh at Shane's eloquence. Yeah, pretty much. I just tried to tough it out, hope someday I could prove everything they said about me wrong, but then one day, my f-dash. Izuku cut himself off. After over 3 months of separation, it had been slowly dawning on him that Katsuki was never really his friend. Even if they were close as toddlers, even if he sometimes stopped others from abusing him, a decade of poor treatment wasn't just some bump in a relationship. While the two had grown to some form of mutual respect after their fight at Ground Beta, it was far from any sort of friendship. The person I thought was my best friend told me to take a swan dive off the roof. And I thought about it. Only for a moment, and I decided I would never do something like that, but in that moment, going on just didn't seem that appealing. I'm sorry I snapped at you. Shane mumbled out, clearly setting up for another self-detrimental spiel. Hey, it's all right. I didn't tell you all that to make you feel bad. My point is that I thought of the people, or at that time I guess it was just the one person that was there for me, and that was enough to keep me going until things got better. It may not seem like it now, but you have a lot of people that care. I know it will probably take a while, and this probably won't be the last time you feel like you would be better off dead, but things will get better. And I know everyone in this town is more than happy to help. At first Izuku thought the silence following his speech was a positive, and that Shane was simply digesting the information before responding, but the continuing lack of a response quickly set him on edge. Izuku was just about to check and make sure the man didn't pass out when he finally heard Shane speak. Hey kid. Yeah. I think you should take me to the hospital now. Needing no further prompting, Izuku picked the man up while making sure his head was tilted just in case he vomited. A rustling sound caught his attention before he saw Kyoka emerge from the edge of the forest, relieved to see Shane alive and not really that well. But alive, nonetheless. The trip to Harvey's clinic took longer than Izuku would have liked, but ensuring Shane wasn't thrown around from running at full speed kept Izuku from rushing ahead. Kyoka ran ahead of him to alert Harvey to the situation, and Izuku arrived to find the doctor had already prepped a bed for the man. Thank you for bringing him in. I'll call Marnie and let her know. You two should go home and get some rest after a stressful evening like this. Harvey said while he prepared the equipment to pump Shane's stomach and rehydrate him after. I know an excellent counselor in Zuzu City. Depression is never easy, especially mixed with substance abuse, but she does good work. Reassured that Shane would be getting treated physically and mentally, the two farmers listened to the good doctor's orders and went home to finish their baking and get some rest. As the pair passed the bus stop, Kyoka broke the silence first. So, I'm guessing that friend who told you to jump was Bakugu, right? Why, you heard that? Izuku stammered out. I thought I heard Shane shouting something, but when I got close you were already talking about that. Didn't really seem like a good time to interrupt. Well, thanks for letting me finish. But yeah, that was Katsuki. Well, it's not like I could pay him back for that, no matter how much I want to. Kyoka squeezed Izuku's hand. The idea of her boyfriend considering the thought of committing suicide, even for just a moment, made Kyoka want to keep him as close as possible. At least for the evening. I'm just glad you didn't listen to him. Now at the threshold of their home, Izuku brought his lover into a tight hug. Whether it was for himself or Kyoka, he wasn't really sure. Yeah, me too. As Izuku bid farewell to Gunther and closed the door behind him, he heard Kyoka speak from her position on the sofa. So what did he want? The farmer flopped back onto the sofa to continue where he left off on the pair's busy day filled with F-all. Gunther came by to say from all the stuff we donated the museum is being offered some award for significant contributions to the field. Izuku dug into his pants pocket to fish out the small trinket the curator passed as a reward. He also said he wanted us to keep this old key. Kyoka took the key from his hands to look it over. While it had obviously been quite beautiful once, the years had taken their toll. Much of the key's surface was covered in rust, and even the few bits of exposed metal had been tarnished and discolored, but still bore impressive engraving that would have taken quite some time to finish. The overall shape of the object was intact, and the key would likely still work, but that was only if the two could find the lock to which it matched. So, We find all these gems and artifacts, enough for the museum to earn an award, and he gives us some old key? That is what I just said, yes. The time he had spent with Kyoka had given the Verdinette a rather dry sense of humor, and while he could never quite match the girl quip for quip, he did have his moments. Did he even say what it unlocks? Kyoka asked while handing the key back. Izuku pocketed it before responding, no, but I think I have an idea. A quirked eyebrow was enough for him to continue. Do you remember that old, rusted hatch near the cemetery that leads to the sewers? Kyoka let out an exasperated groan. Are you really going to drag me out to go explore the sewers on our day off? No. Izuku wrapped his arms around Kyoka before dragging her down with himself to lay on the couch. We're doing that tomorrow. He felt one of the girl's earphone jacks snake its way down his chest, stopping at the spot closest to his heart. The first time it happened, the day after the two made their mutual feelings clear, it had been a subconscious act, but one that soon became a regular occurrence. By now Kyoka actually had problems falling asleep unless she was listening to the steady, calming beat of her boyfriend's. Not that either of the two were complaining about it. Fine. The next day before the two ventured to the mines, hoping that this trip would be the one that would have them reach the bottom, the farmers took a detour to inspect the locked grate that blocked an old sewer tunnel. Normally Izuku wouldn't bother with entering the sewers and instead simply check if the key did in fact open the way up to sate his curiosity. However, early in the spring he came across Vincent and Jazz by an old sewer tunnel that led out near the forest, trying to figure out a way inside to explore. As he moved closer, the two must have heard something that spooked them, as they quickly ran from the dark tunnel and hid behind his legs. At the time Izuku had chalked it up to overactive imaginations and the wind echoing off the walls inside. Of course, the two farmers had seen stranger occurrences than sewer-dwelling creatures by this point, so they felt a quick check was warranted. A soft click rang out as Izuku inserted and turned the key, and with a slight heave, at least slight for him, the rusted-over hinges squeaked and groaned as the grate was forced open. The smell was actually not that bad. It was still a sewer, and the scent could be described as anything but pleasant, but either this was a remarkably clean sewer or the two had a surprisingly high tolerance for foul stenches. As the two descended a ladder, instead of the expected pitch-black tunnels, they found the area lit up by wall-mounted lights. Izuku walked forward and turned to his left, facing the nearest light. It wasn't any form of lantern but what looked like a small, dim globe of pure light. Not only was something living down in the sewers, but it either had access to or used magic. As Izuku lost himself in thought trying to deduce just what exactly was going on, Kyoka saw a dark, vaguely humanoid mass peek around a corner. As her eyes adjusted to the light level, she realized it wasn't just shrouded in shadow, but entirely composed of shadows. The earphone jack user was quick to spring into action. "Get back!" she shouted while shoving Izuku behind her and moving her jacks to be ready to strike. Even though this shadow person was smaller than the shadow brutes that dwelled in the mines, Kyoka wasn't about to take her chances. Upon seeing the girl enter a combat-ready stance, the shadow person let out a timid "eep" before darting around the corner. Out of all the things the two expected from the monster, from a sudden charge or strange magics, a yelp of fear and fleeing was far from top of the list. Both farmers were at a loss on what to do. Clearly it wasn't hostile like the shadow brutes, but trying to pursue might risk being attacked out of fear. Izuku took a few steps forward before speaking. Hello there. I'm sorry if we scared you." There was a brief PRD of silence before a quiet voice was heard from around the corner. Are you going to hurt me?" Kyoka winced at the question, and decided to try and reconcile with the monster. "No, we aren't. The shadow people we met in the mines attacked us on sight, so when I saw you, I jumped to conclusions. Sorry." "It's all right, and I'm sorry for scaring you." The monster peeked his head out again, and seeing that the two farmers no longer looked hostile, stepped out from around the corner. Like his kin, the shadow person was entirely composed of a black mass that reminded the two of Dark Shadow, the sentient quirk of their classmate Tokoyami. The one in front of them was smaller and seemed to lack arms. "Hello, my name is Krobus. I'm a merchant of sorts. Mostly I just sell things I find to other monsters like myself, or sometimes the wizard, Rasmodius." but my shop is open to all. Izuku walked up and extended a hand, before realizing his mistake. Just as he was about to apologize, Krobus' body shifted, and part of his torso extended to meet the farmer's. After a moment of shock, the boy recovered before speaking. I'm Izuku, and this is Kyoka. We moved here recently. A spark of recognition flashed across Krobus' lack of eyes. Oh, the wizard mentioned you two before. He said you were really friendly. With introductions out of the way, Kyoka moved closer to ask the shadow person some questions. If you don't mind me asking, why are you living in the sewers? Well, for the most part my people don't really like humans, and humans tend to destroy things they don't understand. Another wince from the violet. I wanted to experience more of the world than an underground cave, and the wizard was kind enough to help me set up a shop down here. So, you moved out of an underground cave and into an underground sewer system? Asked a very confused Izuku. Krobus didn't seem to notice the farmer's bewilderment. It gets so humid down here when it rains. It's great. Well, if it makes him happy, Izuku thought to himself. We were just checking to make sure nothing dangerous was down here, but it was nice to meet you, Krobus. With no more reason to stick around, the two bid farewell to the shadowy merchant and promised to visit his store sometime in the future. The two made their way to the cave entrance that held the mines and took the elevator down to the lowest floor available. While the elevator car descended deep into the crust of the earth, Kyoka turned to her boyfriend. Hey Aizu, the boy turned his head to face her. If we find more shadow people, can we not fight them? The knowledge that the shadow people were in fact sentient gave the farmers incentive to avoid any unnecessary confrontation with the monsters. I was about to say we should probably avoid them if we can. As the elevator slowed to a halt and the doors opened, the two stepped out with new conviction and got to work. Izuku was practically vibrating from excitement during the short walk from the farmhouse to the town. After all, it wasn't Christmas every day. Well, to be more accurate, today was the Feast of the Winter Star, but with the candy cane decorations, large pine trees adorned with ornaments and presents underneath, and a town-wide secret gift exchange, it was Christmas in all but name. The Midoriya duo had always held a rather small celebration on the 25th, a day full of Christmas-themed all-night specials ending in a large dinner and a few small gifts between the mother and son. The boy was always grateful for the time he got to spend with his mother, who was usually busy with her job as a nurse. He might not have received as many presents or gone on expensive trips over winter break like his more affluent peers, but he never minded that much. Especially now that I have someone like Kyoka to celebrate with. He thought while stealing a glance at the violet. As both farmers drew near to the town center, the two placed wrapped packages underneath a towering pine tree to be retrieved later for the gift exchange. Lewis had sent out letters a week ago to all the villagers saying who they would be the secret friend of. Kyoka's gift recipient was Linus, an older man who lived a simplistic lifestyle, living in a tent in the mountains out of his own volition. While the farmers were at first concerned that the man was destitute, an assumption made after finding Linus rummaging through trash cans, they respected his wishes and didn't pry or try to fix his lifestyle. Izuku's secret friend was Clint, and the farmer had a much harder time deciding on a gift compared to Kyoka. The blacksmith pretty much lived his profession, and beyond an attraction to Emily that everyone except the girl in question knew about, Izuku didn't have much of a lead on what he liked to do in his free time. Eventually the Verdinette decided to get the man something that might give him a new hobby. Or anything to do besides blacksmithing. The gift exchange wouldn't be held until after the actual feast, which most of the town considered the real attraction of the holiday. It was in the name after all. A sizable portion of town events had been defined by large banquets. Even holidays like Spirits Eve had been complemented by a lavish spread, although it was probably to be expected of an agriculture-based town. However, the offerings on display currently made the past events, bar possibly the luau, look like cheap potlucks unworthy of being called a feast. From roast turkey and prime rib to mashed potatoes and stuffing, it seemed like every type of food the two farmers had associated with a Western-style Christmas diner was available, and in such a copious amount that the pair began to suspect a large majority of the town's tax payments went to funding this one holiday. A few smaller tables for families circled around the larger community tables. Kyoka and Izu passed by Leah and Elliot, both of whom sat next to Gus while looking completely bored out of their skulls by his in-depth explanation of how he makes his artisanal candy canes, and sat down at a table with Marnie, Jazz, and Shane. The rancher offered an invitation to dine with them as thanks for the incident with Shane, and while the two insisted that no thanks was necessary, they took up the offer nonetheless. Shane was looking much better since that night in the woods, although he was still having some issues with insomnia. Even though the health issues that came with long-term alcohol abuse would take some time to show noticeable improvement, Shane was cautiously optimistic for the future. The fact he now was able to spend the money that used to go towards alcohol on other things, like gifts for Jazz and Marnie, definitely helped motivate the man. After some pleasant small talk and the revelation that Shane not only was a surprisingly good ranch hand but had also somehow bred blue-colored chickens, the five went to work devouring the table full of food in front of them, not willing to let the meal go cold. After everyone had consumed their weight in turkey, stuffing, and non-alcoholic sparkling grape juice, Lewis announced the start of the secret gift exchange, and the two farmers split off to deliver their presents. Kyoka approached the gray-haired hermit, who had stayed near the edge of the event after grabbing a plate of food. "Hey Linus, got something for you," she said with a grin before handing the man the gift. As Linus tore away the wrapping paper, underneath was a tightly rolled sleeping bag designed for winter weather. His eyes lit up as he unrolled the bag. "Why, this is a great gift." "Thank you, Kyoka." With no care to any onlookers, he quickly zipped the bag around himself, wishing to test how it held up to the chill. "Well, I'd say that was a success," the girl thought to herself as she watched Linus roll his way back to his tent. "Maybe I should have gotten a color other than yellow though. He's starting to remind me of Aizawa." Meanwhile, Izuku approached the town's blacksmith with his gift. "Here you go, Clint, I hope you like it." Briefly shielding his eyes to avoid being blinded by the boy's smile, Clint unwrapped the present only to tilt his head in confusion at the farmer's choice in gift, some basic kitchenware and a few cookbooks. "Not that I don't appreciate it, but why cooking stuff?" "Well, you never really talked about doing anything besides blacksmithing, so I figured cooking might be a good hobby. Plus, you wouldn't have to go to the saloon every day for dinner." The man seemed surprised by the response. "Oh, usually every year someone just gets me a new hammer. You know, because I'm a blacksmith." Clint absent-mindedly flipped through the books, simply appreciating the fact someone got him a gift that didn't involve blacksmithing in some way. "Thank you, Izuku, this means a lot." As the pair of farmers met up by the central tree, Caroline and Harvey stopped by to deliver their own gifts. Caroline gave her fellow green-haired resident a porcelain tea set, and the doctor gave Kyoka an album from a band that was recommended to him, as well as a set of earplugs and a request to not play the music too loud and risk damaging her hearing. With the gift swap over, most of the residents went home to have their own celebrations with family, while some of the social butterflies of the town stayed to chat and pick over whatever food was left. The two farmers bid farewell and made their way home. "Hard to believe it's been a year already," Kyoka said. "Doesn't really feel like it." "Probably because it's been 4 months. The Verdinette corrected. The Violet gave Izuku a smirk. "Yeah, I know that, but eventually we're going to have to get used to the way they measure time here. Might as well start now." She finished with a shrug. As the two entered their home and set their gifts down, Izuku thought about how much his life had changed since that day at the mall. In 4 short months he already found himself calling this place home. "Well, if I knew we would be celebrating our anniversary of moving into town, I would have gotten you something." "That's okay." Kyoka turned to face Izuku, before pulling him into a deep kiss. "I've got everything I need." The evening sun slowly fell over the last day of fall, as Izuku sat on the front porch of a large farmhouse, looking out over the now cleared fields. In a secluded corner close to the forest, the last of the fall harvest fermented into wine while the farm animals lazily meandered back to their resting spots. The greenhouse, now rebuilt from ruins with the help of the Junimos, stood tall, growing fruit by the bushel year-round. Speaking of the little forest spritz, after Kyoka and Izuku had completed all of their requests, they had fully repaired the old community center before returning to the forest. The farmers still saw them on occasion. Sometimes a particularly curious or brave one would venture onto the farm or by the beach and would always offer a greeting to the two before running off to do whatever they did. It had been 1,095 days since the mall incident, and while most of the residents in the valley were concerned with the end of the season, today held special meaning for Izuku and Kyoka. Near the northwest corner of the farm, a small shrine to the old owner was hidden away, overgrown with vegetation, and after the two had discovered it, they made sure to properly care for the small memorial. Kyoka had the idea of setting up a small shrine of their own nearby, for the family and friends they had left back in Japan. They may not have been dead. Well, with how things were looking with the League of Villains, they hoped no one was dead, but it provided some needed closure. Izuku took it on himself to keep track of every 365th day after the mall incident, and on that day the couple promised to take some time and visit. It brought them some comfort to tell everyone back home how they were doing, and what strange happenings they found themselves mixed up in. Although this would be the first visit with more than the pair. "Hey, you ready?" Izuku turned around in his chair to look at his wife. With her earjacks, she carried several baskets filled with food and a blanket suitable for a small picnic. While she was capable of lifting objects with her cords before, the two found out that not only did consuming stardrops strengthen the power of the vibrations she could emit, but the physical properties of her extra limbs as well. Kyoka could probably lift herself with her jacks alone by now. A few baskets was barely noticeable. The reason she had to carry the baskets in such a way was because her hands were full with two small cloth bundles, one with a small tuft of green hair poking out, and the other purple. Izuku stood up and gave his wife a quick kiss while taking the green-haired child into his arms. Kyoku was the eldest of a pair of paternal twins, although only by a few moments, and had a head of straight green hair and tiny auxiliary cord-like nubs growing from his earlobes. The name was Kyoka's suggestion, as her parents once told her they decided on her name by combining theirs, and so the new parents combined Kyo and Ku together. Nana, born with tiny wisps of curly purple hair, was named after the seventh one for All Holder and the mentor of All Might. Both children had Kyoka's onyx eyes and Izuku's freckle pattern. "Yeah, just took a moment to sit down. Everything should be ready for winter." A light tug at his neck made Izuku look down to find the culprit. Kyoku had reached out a hand to grab at a small, spiraling shell on a cord around his father's neck. Izuku and Kyoka wore matching pendants, both shells a beautiful cerulean blue, as they served a combination of engagement and wedding ring. "Well now, someone's feisty today." The Verdinet teased while using his free hand to stop Kyoku from putting the pendant in his mouth. "You don't know the half of it," Kyoka said while trying to stop Nana from performing a similar act with her earphone jacks. "I think they started teething because they've been trying to chew on anything they can get their tiny little hands on." "Well, sound like you've had your hands full." Izuku used a small tendril of black whip to grab the items he set near his chair, some incense and a few small offerings for the two shrines, before leaning close to Kyoka's ear and whispering, "Maybe after we get these two to bed, I'll have to make it up to you. I'll hold you to that. Just keep it in your pants until we're back from the shrine." The woman responded with a smirk. Izuku was glad to have been told by the vestiges they could choose to not see his view whenever he was in a private moment. As Nana put it once, being told by your successor that he named a child after you is touching. Being there for the CNCPTN is just disturbing. The couple walked along the small path to the small sanctuary, ready to introduce the new additions to the Midoriya family, only for a familiar blue light to quickly envelope them as they reached the twin shrines. The glow faded as quick as it came, and the family of four disappeared from the valley without a trace. 5 hours 3 minutes and 17 seconds since Midoriya and Jiro had vanished. Aizawa was resting on a bench near the spot two of his students had disappeared. According to Nomuri, everything on her end went smoothly. The rest of Class 1A were returned to the dorms, parents were contacted, and the combined 21 students and parents had safely arrived at the school grounds to await Midoriya and Jiro's return. Apparently, Ida had even organized the class into cleaning the entirety of the dorms, which sounded like Ida. You would think spending time with people like Uraraka or Midoriya would make him a little less uptight. Speaking of the problem child, Aizawa checked the time again. 5 hours 3 minutes and 44 seconds. The underground hero sighed to himself as he put his phone away. While logically he knew that time limit-based quirks rarely, if ever, ended right as an hour or minute passed, it didn't make the wait any easier. The illogical part of his brain, the part Aizawa thought he buried in a ditch, was panicking and throwing out every possible scenario of why the two hadn't returned yet. "They'll be all right, Aizawa. Just have a little faith." Yagi Toshinori comforted his coworker as he sat next to him on the bench. Aizawa gave the gaunt form of the former number 1 hero a sideways glance. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh please, it's obvious you're concerned about them." The voice of Recovery Girl came from the homeroom teacher's other side. "I've known you from your first day of high school, and I can't recall a single time you were ever bouncing your leg like that." Aizawa looked down and sure enough, the man hadn't noticed the nervous tick until it was pointed out to him. Slapping a hand down to halt the offending extremity, Aizawa turned back to the youthful heroine. "That doesn't prove anything." The two heroes beside him simply let out a small chuckle at his denial, while Aizawa silently wished he had been left to wait for the two alone. It made sense for the two to be here. Wherever the two students ended up could potentially be dangerous, so having Recovery Girl on hand to heal any possible injuries was a no-brainer. And while he may not be an active hero after the battle at Kamino Ward, Yagi still made people feel safe with his presence, a testament to his impact as the symbol of peace that even as a frail skeleton of a man, the symbol never really went away. Plus, anyone that watched the two interact could tell that Midoriya and Yagi had a closer bond than either would admit, so he was brought along both his own sake as well as the students'. But right now, no amount of logical reasoning would make him put up with this absolute slander. "You know what, I'll check the perimeter in case they show up outside this area, and you two can dash." His complaints died on his lips as Aizawa was blinded by a bright flash. A blue light. Simultaneously cursing the eye strain and thanking whatever higher being was in control of his life, unless it was Nizu, the hero waited for the light to fade and his Bison return, hoping his students were all right. Blinking away the last of the spots in his vision, Aizawa looked down at the hazy forms of what was certainly Midoriya and Jiro, who currently sat on the ground clearly blinded by the light even worse than Aizawa. The two were no longer dressed in their uniforms, now wearing what looked like casual clothing found in the West, and were surrounded by what looked like picnic baskets, their contents scattered on the floor. Okay, so they were probably gone for a while, but they at least had food. As he moved forward to help the two off the floor, Aizawa's vision came into greater focus, and he noticed something else. The two looked noticeably older and had certainly grown in height. It was hard to tell with Jiro, but she had grown at least a few centimeters. Izuku on the other hand had shot up. At least Izuku's vision recovered first, and briefly went into a panic. It ended the second he saw the violet next to him, before he began to look around his surroundings in confusion. What happened? What's going on? Either Yagi and Recovery Girl hadn't heard the boy speak out in English or elected to ignore it, as they had now recovered and approached the two, stopping alongside Aizawa. "Young Midoriya, young Jiro, are you two all redash?" The skeletal blonde was cut off, as two babies swaddled in small cloth bundles and being carried by Izuku and Kyoka, which had previously gone unnoticed by the three teachers, now started to cry. Despite the confusion, the pair was quick to begin soothing the crying infants, and the trio got a better look at the sources of the noise. Two children, around 5 or 6 months old. One with straight green hair and the other a mess of purple curls, both with tiny freckle patterns exactly like Midoriya's. As the two worked to calm their children, the UA teachers sat in stunned silence. Just as the crying abated, Aizawa spoke up to ask the two in front of him for an explanation into where they had gone and the details of how they acquired two infants. "What? Well, you tried to... All Might? Aizawa? Why are you two here? Did you get hit with the quirk too? But if so, why did?" Just as Midoriya lost himself into a mutter storm as he tried to figure out what exactly was going on, he realized the sudden change of surroundings and quickly craned his head to look around. "Is this the mall? But we were just..." Toshinori put up a hand to interrupt his successor. "Yes, this is the Kiyoshi Ward Mall. And for the how and why of things, do you two remember going on a shopping trip with your class and coming across a distressed young boy?" Izuku and Kyoka gave a small nod to confirm. Well, as I'm sure you two have likely figured out, the boy's quirk sent you two to a different dimension, but it only lasts for a limited time until whoever is sent away returns. It's been about 5 hours since the boy's quirk was used on you. 5 hours? Kyoka's panicked voice was met by confirmation from Aizawa. 5 hours and about 4 minutes when the quirk wore off. We were gone for 3 years. We thought we were never coming back. The woman's distressed face was quickly replaced with one of horror. Oh my God. She spoke out to herself. If we weren't holding the twins, before she could entertain the terrifying thought of being separated from her children with no chance to see them again, Izuku took hold of Kyoka's hand to ground her. Kyoka, please look at me. Now snapped from the dark thoughts, Kyoka looked towards her husband. It doesn't matter what would have happened because it didn't. We're still together and we still have the twins. We may have gotten lucky, but it won't help to think about what could have been. Yeah, you're right, she said while running her thumb over Izuku's hand. While the two had their moment together, the 3 teachers sat to the side forgotten. Eventually Aizawa, still processing the new additions his problem children had brought, decided he had enough for today. I'm going to call Namuri. With someone. As he stood up and walked away, Recovery Girl and Toshinori heard a faint, I don't get paid enough for this. Alright, you two lovebirds can stare into each other's eyes all you want later, Recovery Girl interrupted the two, but right now I need to make sure you're both healthy and then get you back to the dorms. The rest of your class and your parents are waiting, and I think you'll have a bit of explaining to do. The healing hero gave a quick glance to the now babbling children. Izuku and Kyoka paled at her words. Oh no, my mom is going to freak out. With how much he expected his mother to cry at the news, Izuku hoped that Nizu had water damage covered by the school's insurance. Kyoka had a different fear. At least she'll be happy. My dad is either going to commit murder or have an aneurysm when he learns you defiled his baby girl. The two felt a quick flash of pain from their shins and looked to see Recovery Girl ready to deliver another blow with her cane if necessary. What did I just say? You two can deal with the family drama on your own time, but I've got a job to do. Unless you want another? A quick flurry of no's was her answer. Even after 3 years, neither Izuku nor Kyoka had forgotten how terrifying the healer could be. Good answer. Now unless you two have any injuries to treat, I just need to check on Midoriya's arm to make sure the ligament damage hasn't worsened. The Vertinet perked up at the request, and after giving Kyoku to his wife to hold, he worked on pulling up his sleeve. Actually, we found someone that managed to help out with that. Showing his arm to the hero, she quickly saw what he meant. Where once Midoriya's arm was covered in scar tissue from shattering his arm multiple times, now there was only smooth, unblemished skin. How did this happen? Recovery Girl half asked to Midoriya, half to herself. Not only healing what should have been permanent ligament damage, but the complete absence of scar tissue. It shouldn't be possible with the medical technology we have. Oh, because it wasn't healed by conventional medicine. Kyoka and I met a wizard who was able to heal my arm. Recovery Girl took a moment to digest what she just heard, before asking a simple question. What? After 3 years of living in a semi-magical world, Izuku found no problem with such a claim. When he looked at the stunned face of Recovery Girl, however, he realized how what he just said would sound like complete nonsense to anyone else. I know that sounds crazy, but dash. The youthful heroine didn't stay to listen to his explanation, instead simply dropping the man's arm and walking away. Our Recovery Girl? Don't you need to finish looking us over? Izuku was only met with grumbling that sounded a little bit like, why don't you ask some wizard to do it? Before she left, presumably to find Aizawa. She'll be fine, Toshinori said to the pair after helping the two up and moving to the bench he was previously waiting at. I'm sure she's just concerned you'll take this as a green light to keep putting yourself in danger, young Midoriya. The retired pro and Kyoka shared a small laugh, while Izuku protested such a claim. Hey, I haven't broken a single bone since we washed up in Pelican Town. I can even use full cowling at 100% now. Even if does kinda strain my body. Toshinori took a moment to ruffle his successor's hair. Well, That's wonderful news, my boy. And I'm guessing that young Jiro here knows about that. Midoriya. The woman in question corrected. Huh? The blonde asked in confusion. We're married, so it's Midoriya now. And yeah, I know about One for All. Of course. My apologies. Toshinori rubbed the back of his head, clearly embarrassed. Well, if young Midoriya trusts you, then I will defer to his judgment. Standing up and moving towards the scattered baskets and food, the lanky man went to work picking up the mess. Well, you two have certainly had an odd day. I'll get this cleaned up and then we can get you to the dorms. Izuku was not one to stand aside when he could help, however. Don't worry about it, All Might, I can get it. Before the man could protest, he saw a black tendril shoot past his head and pick up the scattered contents with an impressive degree of finesse. Soon the tile floor of the mall was spotless, and Toshinori looked over to see his successor use the strange coil coming from his fingers to place a fully packed picnic basket and a neatly folded blanket into his arms. What? A sudden realization hit Izuku. Oh right, I haven't explained the other quirks. He muttered to himself, loud enough for the eighth holder to hear. What? Midoriya Inko was a nervous woman. Anyone who had met her would be able to tell you that. But right now, she was surprisingly calm considering the situation. She was worried about her son, of course, but pro-hero work was a dangerous profession, and not a day went by that she wasn't concerned for Izuku's safety. When she got a call from UA, she had initially feared that her son had been injured again, or the League of Villains had made another attack on his class. Hearing that her boy was involved in a quirk accident during a class excursion to the mall and would be warped away to who knows where for 5 hours was far from the most concerning thing she had to deal with. Right now, she was currently waiting in the dorms for Izuku's return while conversing with Kyoka's parents. From what she had been told of the girl, Izuku could have been worse off. It seemed that their class had nothing but good things to say about the two, which lessened her fears somewhat. Izuku could have been sent wherever he was alone, or with someone like the small boy with purple ball for hair. Inko never liked to assume, but from the way the girls of the class tried to distance themselves from him, she didn't want someone like that associating with her son. The rest of the class were pleasant to talk to. Inko had been told stories from her son about the new friends he was making at UA, but this was the first time she had the chance to meet them. The 4 of his closest friends, Uraraka, Ida, Azui, who end on being called Tsu, and Todoroki all had great things to say about Izuku, and even the classmates he wasn't as close with had stories about how kind of a person her son was. The Jiro patriarch, Kyotoku, seemed doubtful of Izuku's intentions and suspected some sinister intent behind his actions, but his wife, Mika, was quick to inform Inko that he was just being overly protective of their daughter. The near-childish refusal of her claim didn't help his case. While the parents traded embarrassing stories of their children's childhoods, with Ishido and Kaminari listening in for blackmail material, the rest of the class busied themselves while waiting for Midoriya and Jiro's return. Sato was in the kitchen, cleaning up after baking confections for their guests. Shiro and Kirishima were purposely annoying Bakugo, who was stuck between wanting to lash out in anger and watching his language while in Auntie Inko's presence. The rest of the class had separated into their own little groups, trying to enjoy the rest of their day after wearing themselves thin with Ida's impromptu cleaning session. The peaceful atmosphere was broken when Aizawa slammed open the door with a 1,000-yard stare. Ida was the first to stand up and approach his homeroom teacher. Sensei, are Midoriya and Jiro only to be cut off as the man walked past the class president and made a beeline for Kaminari. I know you've been stashing alcohol in the dorms. The electric blonde tried to spurt out a panicked denial but was interrupted. Aizawa. You're not in trouble this one time as long as you tell me where it is. After shakily pointing to a cabinet in the kitchens, Aizawa stopped off and grabbed the first bottle he found, tore off the seal and started chugging. After downing a fifth of a bottle of vodka in one go, the entire class thought they heard the man mutter out, "Goddamn problem children are multiplying." Deciding his friend's safety took priority over reprimanding his classmate for bringing a prohibited substance onto school grounds, Ida tried to find out what was going on. Sensei, is everything all right? We thought you were waiting for Dash. Once again the brunette was cut off by the slam of a door, looking over to see Recovery Girl's short frame occupying the doorway. Not even giving anyone the chance to ask a question, the healer walked up to Aizawa, who without even being asked, passed down a bottle of whiskey to the elderly hero. "Hey, wizard," she grumbled out in between gulps, "probably doesn't even have a medical license." By now the entire room was concerned with the display in front of them, as not only had the students never seen their teachers act like this, but the situation with Midoriya and Jiro still went unanswered. Ashido was the first to break the silence that had overtaken the group. "So, does this mean that Aizawa and Recovery Girl don't know what's going on, or they do and it's bad?" A wave of confusion and no small amount of dread swept through the room, and the three parents started to fear the worst. Sato and Ida, who were in the kitchen, as well as Shoji, who was able to make out what the two heroes were mumbling about, gave each other confused looks. How did wizards factor into the situation? Again, the door slammed open to show the emaciated form of Yagi Toshinori, but Bakugo was ready this time. Before the man could follow his co-worker's leads, Yagi was stopped by the explosion user. "God darn it, will someone just explain what the heck is going on with the nerd and ears?" "Both of them are fine," Toshinori said to the amassed crowd. "Oh, thank goodness." Inko breathed a sigh of relief, before Mika asked what most of the group was thinking. "But something had to have happened, right? Why are they like, well that?" The woman gestured towards the two heroes, both determined to reach the bottom of their bottles. The former symbol of peace floundered as he tried to think of the best way to explain. "Well, you see, the thing is," as the man faltered under the fierce gaze of three worried parents, the doors opened once again, this time normally, and not slammed open, and revealed the two in question. "Oh, I think that's them now. They can explain it better than I could, glad to have helped." Before heroically fleeing the scene and into the kitchen for the comfort of humanity's oldest friend. Turning to the door, Inko was the first to approach the pair. "Oh, Izuku, I'm so glad you're all right. You have no idea how, only to freeze once she got a good look at the two. There were a lot of things different about her son, not least of all his height. Unless the boy had an insane growth spurt in the last week since he had visited, something was amiss. He also looked older, only by a few years, but the lingering baby fat on his cheeks had vanished. But the most eye-catching part of Izuku's appearance wasn't actually anything about himself, but the small child he held in his arms, who had a forest green head of hair and tiny little ear jacks. Jacks that looked just like the ones belonging to the purple-haired girl next to her, that was holding a child with the same shade of hair, but in familiar messy curls. Behind her, the rest of the class, which was close to exploding in one large greeting, had fallen silent. Most of the girls felt a weird mixture of relief and jealousy, some jealous of Kyoka, a few of Izuku. Ashido was the exception, as she was not only envious of both of them, but also having a minor epiphany of just what that odd feeling was earlier. The guys all felt amazed that such a pure soul like Midoriya had kids at all, as they thought he would fate at the mere mention of section. Kaminari and Siro couldn't believe that somehow Midoriya got laid before them, while Mineta was utterly devastated at that information. Bakugo was wondering how the hell some timid F, like Deku, got with someone like Ears. Back where the Jiros sat, the two were coming to terms with the fact they had grandchildren to spoil now. The silence was tense, the only sound in the dorms the three teachers getting drunk in the kitchen. Inko felt tears well up in her eyes. "My baby boy is all grown up," before rushing to give her son and his wife a hug. "I can't believe it, I'm so happy for you, my babiesifathero himagranmother and aniver methagurla at soniceta As Inko began to rant faster and faster while asking any and every question she could think of about their relationship, the entire class bar Bakugo had a collective thought. Oh, that's where he gets it from. Having grown up with the Midoriyas, the explosive blonde was well aware of how his auntie could get. Izuku tried to calm his mother. Mom, it's all right, just take a breath." The woman caught her breath after stopping her question rant, while Izuku introduced the two. "This is Kyoka, we've been married about a year and a half now." This caused the class to let out a loud, collective, "what?" while Kyoka introduced Inko to the twins. "Izuku's holding Kyoku right now, and this is Nana. They're a week away from 6 months. While Inko was gushing over her grandbabies, Kyotoku was tearing up on the couch. My little rock star, grown up. Mika looked over to her husband. I honestly thought you would be making a scene by now. For the entirety of Kyoka's middle school years, any attention from a member of the opposite SEC had her husband ready for war. They're already married, Mika. It's not like I can drive him off. Kyoka would even give the chance to yell at him. I'll still give him the "don't ever hurt her" speech, but I have to get a shallow grave ready for that. Kyotoku went back to his weepy slouch while his wife rolled her eyes behind him. The class quickly amassed around the pair, either cooing over the babies, prying for details like how they started dating, or giving Midoriya and grin and a thumbs up. As the gathered teens were laughing at Nana reaching out to grab Todoroki's nose and Inko was trying to call Mitsuki, Mineta let out a comment just loud enough to be heard over the crowd. Ding, I guess that means Jiro-san off now. While a few classmates admonished him for the perverse comment, most noticed that Midoriya had gone scarily quiet. What, all the guys are thinking it? As Kaminari and Shiro tried to distance themselves from the ire drawn towards Minteta, Izuku turned to his wife. Kyoka. A previously unheard edge to Midoriya's voice sent the rest of the class silent. Even the three teachers in the kitchen stopped their bender to see what was happening. Could you hold Kyoku for a second? After safely handing over the boy, Izuku shot out a tendril of black whip, surprising everyone in the room and grabbing ball-headed boy by the collar of his shirt. Mineta. The sheer malice Izuku spoke the boy's name with gave the class goosebumps. I will make myself clear. If you ever make those kinds of comments about any of the girls, and especially Kyoka, I will personally dash. Midoriya Izuku, his mother's voice called out behind him. Put that boy down now. Knowing better than to earn his mother's ire, Izuku put the small teen down. I can't believe you. I thought I raised you better than this. Shaking her head while she stepped up to the pop-off user. That isn't how you threaten someone for making such foul comments. Fearing for his life, Mineta looked around the class for help, only to find none. Shiro and Kaminari quickly looked away, and even Bakugo looked fearful of what would happen if he let himself be involved. Do you know what my quirk is, Mineta-kun? A fearful shake of his head was all the boy could muster. It's called attraction of small objects, and it does just that. It may not be all that strong, but it's useful enough around the house, I suppose. Inko kneeled down and placed a hand on Mineta's shoulder, the boy swearing she would break his bones. But what a lot of people don't think about is that the body is just full of small objects. The previously warm smile turned cold and harsh. And with your size, using my quirk wouldn't be that hard. The small boy's eyes rolled into the back of his head as he fainted from fright. As Ojiro picked Mineta up to move him off the floor, a floating mass of clothes was the first to ask, Hey, anyone else confused by the weird shadow thing Mito did? Or why they're older? And married? Tokoyami was just as confused as Hagakure. To believe that one as bright as Midoriya is capable of producing such darkness. Do you mean the threats or the shadow whip? Shiro asked. Yes. An emerging dark shadow quipped. Now that the class had calmed down after seeing Inko's terrifying display, Izuku had the chance to explain the situation. So, the quirk we got hit with warps people then returns them 5 hours later, at least to outside observers. Most of the class nodded along with his explanation, as they had been informed of the nature of the quirk already, but a few of the more observant members noticed the exact phrasing of his words. For the people hit with the quirk, however, the effect varies. So, while for all of you it's only been 5 hours, we were gone for 3 years. Before Inko or the Jiros could react to the news that their children had been separated from their friends and families for 3 years, Izuku continued to answer the class's other burning question. On the trip back to the dorms, Izuku and Kyoka both thought it would be best if they addressed the new features of the Verdunet's quirk as soon as possible and formed an explanation that would at least be somewhat plausible. And as for the shadow whip, I call it black whip. It turns out my quirk is like Todoroki's, where it's one quirk but produces multiple effects. Which was technically true, as one for all only replicated the quirks of the past holders. While the rest of the class was freaking out at the new development, Bakugo remained in the back, a scowl deepening across his face. There was more to his story that he wasn't telling, likely something closely linked to the nature of One for All itself, but even though he felt his blood boil at the nerd becoming an even bigger hurdle in his path to become number one, the blonde kept his mouth shut. For now. As the class pestered Izuku and Kyoka for all the details of their 3-year disappearance, Aizawa emerged from the kitchen while slipping his phone back into his pocket and a half-empty bottle of vodka in his hand. I just got a message from Nizu. Due to the tired man let out a sigh while pinching the bridge of his nose. Unusual circumstances, the rat is requesting a meeting to work out the future of your education here. The couple gave Aizawa a small nod before he continued. Although you are technically no longer minors, and their presence is not required, your parents are welcome to attend. I'm sure you all have a lot to discuss. The underground hero said while giving a glance at the 2 new problem children in Izuku and Kyoka's arms, before turning back to the kitchen to hopefully forget the entirety of the past 24 hours. Bidding the rest of the class farewell and promising to answer all their questions later, the Midoriya and Jiro group left the dorms to head for Nizu's office. Oh my god, did you see how cute Nana was? Ashido squealed as soon as the door was shut. While Ashido and Hagakure shared the few pictures they had managed to take, Yairozu was more concerned with something else. They had been gone for 3 years. I can't imagine what that must have been like. Beside her, Todoroki joined into the conversation. They likely thought it was permanent, given that they had started a family. While Kirishima was saying how confident he was that Midoriya would be a great father because of how manly he is, and Uraraka slowly died inside. A knock on the door drew everyone's attention. Aoyama opened the door to find the stony visage of Ishiyama Ken, Ie Cementos. Ah, monsieur. To what do we owe the pleasure? The sparkly blonde said with an unnecessary pose. I got a message from Nizu to start working on a new floor to the 1A dorms. Although I am curious why he specified it needed to be suitable for 2 adults and 2 infants. Ida was quick to get his teacher up to speed. After an incident of accidental quirk usage during a trip to the mall, Midoriya and Jiro had vanished, only to return 5 hours later but 3 years older, and with 2 children. Although, I suppose her family name would be Midoriya now. Cementos let out a quiet sigh. Great, looks like I owe Mike 2,000 yen. Ida was taken aback. Why you made a bet with present Mike on a student's relationship? Pretty much all the teachers did. Ishiyama said, before the slurring voice of Aizawa was heard from the kitchen floor, and it was a stupid thing to bet on. As Cementos neared the elevator, he looked towards the class with a smug grin. Eraser's just bitter he lost 10,000 on Midoriya dating Azui. Karo, please come in. The chipper voice of Nizu said while the door to his office opened before Izuku could even knock. Deku. Even though it had been 3 years, Izuku would never forget Eri's voice. Wow, Mirio was right. You do look older. Looking into the office, the now family of 7 saw an excited young girl with white hair and a small horn running up to hug her hero's legs, while a blonde boy gave a hearty laugh at the display. Hey Eri! Izuku bent down to ruffle her hair, earning a small giggle for his efforts. It's great to see you, but why are you and Mirio here? The 3rd year was quick to answer. Nijire, Tamaki, and I were spending the day off with Eri when I got a call from Eraserhead about what happened at the mall. I wanted to bring Eri over to the 1A dorms with the rest of your class, but someone convinced Nijire for some extra candy and had a sugar crash. While the good-natured jab had no bite behind it, the someone in question still turned her gaze down in embarrassment. As touching as this reunion is, the Chimera interrupted, I do believe we have some business to attend to. As Izuku was dragged with all the might a 6-year-old could muster to the seat next to Ares, the remaining 4 adults filled the empty chairs in Nizu's office. Now, although this is an unusual situation, you two are not the first students we've had that have found themselves with the responsibility of raising children. I think it would be a shame for the events of today to interrupt your education here, and UA is willing to make the necessary accommodations to the dormitories. Initially glad to hear the news, Kyoka noticed something was off. Her father would have been furious at the notion of some boy having a private room alone with his daughter, but he remained silent. In fact, the man hadn't made a scene in the dorms either. A quick glance to her mother showed she was just as confused. Hey Dad? Not that I don't mind how you aren't freaking out, but are you actually alright with this? Kyotoku grew indignant at his daughter's scrutiny. Oh, come on Kyoka, I saw how he handled that pipsqueak. He's perfect. And although he would never admit it, Kyotoku didn't wish to get on Inko's bad side after seeing how terrifying she could be. With that out of the way, there is the matter of your schoolwork. Have you two received any formal education during your excursion? Izuku and Kyoka both gave a denial. In that case, I shall issue you two some placement tests to see if any remedial lessons are necessary, otherwise your lessons will continue with Class 1A as usual. As for your heroics lessons, Aizawa will determine the best course of action after his own evaluations. If you don't mind, I do have a concern. Mika interjected. Raising children is a full-time job. With classwork as well as any future work studies, that's just too much for anyone to handle. Ah, a valid concern, and one I'm glad you've brought up, Mrs. Jiro. Digging through his desk, the quirked chimera pulled out 2 guest passes to UA's grounds, as well as some paperwork. Miss Midoriya, you are currently a practicing nurse, correct? The sudden question surprised the woman. Well, yes, I am, but why is that important? Nizu slid the papers across the desk. Picking the documents up, Inko saw it was the paperwork necessary to be hired at UA. Recovery Girl has been requesting extra assistance during times such as the sports festival or heroics exams. If you were to accept this position, you would be offered on-campus housing as well as be able to look after your grandchildren during Mr. and Mrs. Midoriya's classes. The sentient animal then offered the pass cards to the Jiros. We will also allow you two the opportunity to visit at any time. While Inko was swapping between looking over the paperwork and organizing get-togethers with the Jiros, Izuku grabbed a hold of Kyoka's hand and gave a soft squeeze. It almost seemed too good to be true, but not only was their growing family still together, they had reunited with their own parents and friends, all while receiving the chance to not only be heroes but become heroes together. Izuku would miss the friends he made in Pelican Town, but the little community would be all right in the end. Oblivious to Izuku's thoughts on his future with Kyoka, and bored with watching the grown-ups act weird, Eri turned to Mirio. So Deku and the singer lady from the festival are married. Now, Izuku and Mirio would always be Eri's greatest heroes for saving her from overhaul, but the first time she could remember smiling was at the concert held by Class 1A during the Culture Festival, with Kyoka front and center. The blonde gave Eri a small nod, not wanting to interrupt the moment his, now older than himself, Kohai were sharing. Can they be my mama and papa? All conversations stopped as the Jiros and elder Midoriya looked first to the young girl, and after quickly deciding they were in favor of such an arrangement, stared at their children expectantly. Izuku's eyes swiveled around in his skull, looking towards anyone in the room that would bail him out of the situation, only to find a trio of adults who would murder him if he didn't say yes, an amused Mirio, a chimera softly chuckling to himself, and an equally stunned Kyoka. Kyoka and I will need a chance to talk about it. Upon seeing the girl's face fall after not hearing a yes, Izuku briefly panicked. But I'm definitely okay with that. Are you okay with that, Kyoka? Now noticing the way her parents were staring at the pair, Kyoka was quickly on board. Yes. Absolutely. As Nizu watched the couple become foster parents via peer pressure, the quirked animal pulled out his phone to message Cementos once more. It looked like the new floor would need to hold one more occupant. Izuku had just finished brushing his teeth and was changing into a set of nightwear as Kyoka entered the bedroom, now finished looking over the new floor of the Heights Alliance 1A dorms. Cementos was a quick worker, and he had not only built the floor from scratch, but filled it with the bare essentials as well. The two wanted to move their personal belongings from their old rooms before they retired for the night, but the day's exhaustion had finally caught up to them. After getting the twins to bed, Izuku and Kyoka felt it would be best to do the same. Tomorrow would be a busy day after all, no sense in running themselves ragged. As the two switched off the lights and slipped under the covers, Izuku pulled Kyoka close and she moved one of her ear jacks onto his chest, as they did every night. Hey Aizu! Kyoka's voice broke the silence. Are you alright? Your heartbeat's kinda jumpy. Izuku sighed to himself. He wanted to brush the concern off, But he knew better than that. Kyoka didn't need to hear his heartbeat to tell when he wasn't being honest. I miss everyone back in Pelican Town, but it doesn't feel as bad as when I thought we would never be coming back to Japan. And I guess I just feel bad for not feeling bad. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't make. The Violet cut him off. No, I get it. I'm gonna miss them all too, but I know everyone there will be fine and that's enough to keep me going. Plus, we don't have to worry about the league messing things up without being able to help. Izuku thought about her words for a moment, before responding. Yeah, you're right. Even with his eyes closed, Izuku could hear the grin in Kyoka's voice. Of course I am. Right before sleep was able to take him, Izuku heard Kyoka mutter something out under her breath. And now I get to pay back Bakugu for being a beach in middle school. Kyo, please just let me handle Bakugu. He knew that even someone like him didn't deserve whatever Kyoka was planning. No promises,